then firefighters, Mr. Chair, has taken quite a leap from 48 to 55 line of duty deaths. So that's a number sometimes that we overlook. Back to the fallen heroes, you may have noticed the story. Gary Sinise, actor, paid out of his own pocket for 1,700 family members to go to Disneyland and back on a 4-day flights and all. So just that respect and honor of our vets was just really a heartwarming story. Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's all I have.
And for those of you that don't know, we give a report every week about the fallen first responders. Commissioner Boyce does. And when you come into our county now on both ends, you will see that we've changed the sign in the county that says we support our veterans and all of the first responders. So I just wanted to let everyone know that that's why we give that report, to honor them and their sacrifices made to public service and protection of all of us.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Didn't the road department help you with the funds on that? And pay
Yes, they did.
Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Christensen worked on that to get it done. So, do I have any amendments to the agenda?
I do, Mr. Chair. A lot of activity and interest on our discussion and action items for 7A, the ordinance first reading, vacant and owner absent property registration. I've had some very good citizen input. You know, everybody's out there working for a living, so that information data tends to come in a little bit late, but nonetheless appreciated. And we've had one other elected official. I just read the note this morning. I know Director Smeller's been working very hard on this to have a workshop, and I want to pull the item subject to board approval and recommend that we take serious consideration to the vacant and owner absent property registration. I have some comments. I can hold those, of course, and then I also wanted to pull 7G. We're not ready to vote on that. I think we are making some excellent progress, but it probably did not need to be put on the agenda today. The pace we're keeping for this year is great, but you know, my preference, my personal opinion is we probably should wait till January. So those two items, Mr. Chair.
I'm okay with that, but let me just say on 7G, I think those who are applying needs to apply for a certain position, because a lot of them have lots of things that they can do, and it's hard to classify them in any one of those positions. So I was talking to JJ, and he says it's hard to know where to put them on the list. So I think they need to apply for a certain position.
Okay, so we're going to ask to pull 7A, which is the ordinance first reading, vacant owner absent property registration, and schedule that for a workshop. Ms. Schmelzer?
Okay, that's
All right, and then 7G we're going to pull and ask them to apply for a separate position on that awareness council for suicide prevention. So ordered.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion that we approve the agenda for today's meeting as amended.
I have some other adjustments.
I apologize. I'm sorry.
Need to be made. On the consent agenda, I would like to just ask a couple of questions on 5G and 5H and I. And I have a question on J and K, L, M, N, all of those. And they're kind of a combination question there.
Well, do we need to pull them and put them into discussion, or do we just want to discuss them and leave them in the agenda?
It's up to you. I don't have a whole lot to say, but
Okay, well, let's go ahead and just, I guess for right now, let's talk about the G.
Okay, G, I was just curious what exactly the issues that Commissioner Boyce would be voting on, because he is representing us, and so I just wanted to make sure that what he's doing represents us.
Well, the AOCC counties, 18 BLM counties, are on a shared receipt program. They work incredibly hard. That's in our work through Greg Walden for both 2000 17 and 18, we were able to keep the PIL payments, and that's payment in lieu of taxes. 1.7 was for 2018, 1.6 was for 2019. That goes straight into our general fund, as you know, Commissioner Gould.
Right.
And I have a report, and I could abbreviate it and offer it to the board now. It's on the 2 lawsuits that the Association of ONC Counties just prevailed on, which is tremendous. We actually do not have a lot of BLM land within our county, but it was set up years ago through the ONC Act, 1938, become law, congressional, passed through our Congress, and through the shared receipts, we get receipts back.
Okay, well, that's fine. I'm okay with that now.
Okay.
And then...
But there's a lot of other things that come up that are important. Yes.
Okay.
Second. Counsel?
Thanks. And the title of this may lead people to come to a different conclusion. It says it's the Association of Oregon and California Counties, but there are no California counties in this association. You call it the ONC. It was the Oregon and California Railway Act.
Good point. Some of the commissioners often ask, when are we considering changing our acronym and name both?
But the ONC, the Oregon and California, comes from an old railroad
Right.
name, but it doesn't have any California counties. Just so, and if
Good point.
anybody's wondering about that, so
Yeah, that's from the original, long ago.
long time.
So I've been on the board for 2.5 years, and it is very, very important to our county, as you know.
Okay, H and L, I had a question on that because I was reading through the thing and it said that there was supposed to be a public hearing on this, and I don't recall ever having a public hearing. So, and also it kind of looked to me like the lands were already sold before we had given them over to the park. So maybe, Ms. Schmelzer, you can clarify that.
I can clarify the process that was followed on that. So in early summer, we had...
Microphone.
Thank you. In early summer, we had some people contact us inquiring if they could purchase some properties from the county. So the board discussed whether or not they wanted to proceed with those sales and what those sale amounts would be. We had also discussed a process whereby those properties would be designated as park properties, so when they were sold, then we could take those funds from those sales and put them into park maintenance in our park program. So what happened is we waited, we held those applications, the board discussed them and agreed that yes, they were interested in selling them to these people for that price. The next process was we had to put a public notice in the paper, and that was done, that was advertised in all of our papers. And now the final step is for us to meet here today and decide, do we want to proceed with that actual sale?
So would we give them over to the Parks Department first, maybe in one meeting, and then in the next meeting,
Well, the way
talk
it is,
about the sale?
yeah, so the way it is set up on the agenda is first, we are going to transfer those properties to Parks. Our next agenda item would be then to sell those properties. So it's saying these properties that we're interested in selling will be assigned to our Parks Department, or so to speak, Parks account, and then we are going, then yes, we agree to sell these properties. The next step after the board, if the board approves this today, the next step would be for council to work on the legal aspect of it. You know, deeds, the deeds, I don't believe there'd be any title work since we're county owned, but proceed with the deeds, and we would actually have to collect the sale price and finalize the sale.
So what about the public hearing that was listed in the thing that we got?
So the public hearing is the public meeting, or basically our meeting today and the previous, it would be our meeting today.
So it's not like a regular public hearing?
No, it's not correct. It is not one like we've had with the appeal, for example. It's not an actual hearing in that respect. It just has to, the public hearing, our meeting today would constitute a public hearing.
I actually don't agree with that.
Okay.
Okay.
So I have an issue with this item as well. A public hearing is where you notice an opportunity for the public, because here's what the statute says. It says, before making an order for alienation, sale, or conveyance of the property without approval at an election, so usually you have an election to alienate these properties, or before entering into agreements for management, etc., the county governing body shall hold a public hearing at the county which objections to the proposed agreements or alienation, sale, or conveyance may be heard. So you're supposed to, we've had public hearings before. It is a normal public hearing where you open it up. Is anyone here to talk about this? And before you have the public hearing, you give a notice for 2 weeks in the newspaper, circulated generally within the county. It'll describe the property. So basically, you put out a 2-week notice to everyone saying, hey, we're going to have a public hearing if anyone has any objections for us to hear about the sale of this property. So the ordinance in the packet, especially under the consent agenda, says that we'll have a public hearing. It says, whereas on December 11th, today, following due and proper notice, we held a public hearing in the matter of alienation. And on a consent agenda, you don't even take discussion, so much less a hearing. So this is not appropriate to be done today the way it's been submitted. So I'm sorry about that, but it needs to change somehow. And I recommend continuation of it. I don't know that there's any time sensitivity or urgency to this.
And I would agree with that. So we've had it's been in the paper, so if we want to have it as an actual public hearing, we can carry that over at the next meeting. My only concern with
Did
that,
the newspaper
Council,
notice it, advertise and tell people we were holding a public hearing for them to come up and give us objections?
that's my question. Would we have to rerun the notice in the paper?
Yeah, I'd like to see the notice. I haven't seen it, so I'd have to see the notice.
Can we check during the break and see on that?
But anyway, if
Sure.
it's possible, could we pull this from the consent agenda and continue it to a time in the future when we've had these issues resolved?
Commissioner Boyce?
Just real abbreviated again, give me the basis behind that, because these are four pieces of property that are odd-shaped and probably not of any value. I want to follow the process, but,
Sure.
yeah, just why you want to pull it from the agenda, and I think that's fine.
Right, I just went through it, but it's ORS 275.330 sub 3. And here's what it says, and that statute is actually mentioned in the order that you've had to review today in your packet. And the language of the statute says, before making an order for alienation, sale, or conveyance of the property without approval at an election, the county governing body shall hold a hearing in the county at which objections to the proposed agreements, alienation or sale, may be heard. Notice of the hearing shall be given by publication weekly for 2 consecutive weeks in a newspaper circulated generally within the county, and the notice shall describe the property affected. So it's basically, we've had these notice issues before where we haven't given proper notice and we've seen it blow up in our face.
Yeah.
So we're trying to avoid that by pulling it from the agenda today.
So one follow-up. Go ahead. So with the 400 or 500 pieces of property that we have out there that we would like to get some action on, I'm assuming then that we would inventory these and have 6 or 8, or maybe, would this satisfy down the road that we would be able to move forward on this in the future if we have other properties we think would?
There's a 3-step process to follow. So there's many different ways to sell the property. This is a particular one to have the revenues go to the parks versus and so part of the reason for the public hearing,
I'm following you. Yep.
yes,
Yeah.
usually when we sell a tax foreclosed piece of property, the revenues are distributed per the taxation formula. And it goes distributed. You know how we get a tiny fraction and everybody else gets the most of it. This statute allows the revenues from the sales to bypass that product and go solely to our Parks Department. And that's part of the reason why I think you have this public hearing, to let, in particular, the usual recipients of tax sold property revenues come and say whether they object or not.
So just one quick thing to add to that would be, there's a lot of pieces out there that could be parks, and we need to take a look at each one of those individually if we have this opportunity and if this goes forward. And I'm very interested
Sure.
in that.
Yep.
Parks is a pretty positive spot in our program.
I agree. No, but and
Good
here's
clarification.
If the worst thing to do is if you don't follow the process to the T of the statute, that's when all good intentions go off the track. So we just want to make sure we're doing everything right.
So
All
what we'll
right, so
do-
at this point, we are going to pull H and I from the consent agenda.
Okay, and then Jay, I just had a really quick question. This is about a grant, and I know we have to approve all grants, but I just want to make sure that it's got someone to administer it that's going to be consistent and do it in the right way. So who's going to be the administrator?
That is Jeremy Dumeyer, our Emergency
Okay.
Management Director.
Good enough.
Uh-oh.
And then K, L, M, and N, we're in a tight situation here. I noticed one of those positions was funded with a grant, and once that grant goes away, is this person aware that their job may go away? Just curious.
It would not be funded with a grant after the new fiscal year. The changes in the juvenile 2 to juvenile 1, saves over $20,000 for our department. And then the grant that originally had her funded just increased. The juvenile crime prevention has added $9,000 to our biennium, so it would be continual.
Okay, so the other positions are within your budget?
It actually saves money.
Perfect, okay. That's all I needed. Thanks.
And then I have 2 amendments.
Yes, ma'am.
So, under executive session, I would like to add ORS 192.660, parent 2, parent small e parent, to deliberate with designated real property negotiations. And then we did have HR ask if they could add a change in a job classification under higher order, and that would be in the matter of changing the full-time equivalency status of an employee, decreasing the hours. And that would be added to
11B it would be,
11B,
and that would be for decreasing.
decreasing, yes.
For exec session, I would also like to add,
1 second, please.
okay.
All right, counsel?
Thank you. 192.660, sub 2, sub F and H, and that's matters not subject to disclosure, and that legal advice as well as litigation likely to be filed or current litigation.
All right, can I get a motion, please?
I move that we approve the agenda as amended.
Sorry, I jumped the gun before. I'll second that, Mr. Chair.
Further discussion? Roll, please.
Commissioner Gold,
Aye.
Vice Chair Boyce,
Yes.
Chair Pash,
Aye.
motion carried unanimously.
And you know what, I jumped the gun on something, so let's go back to 4, and that will be the public comments. I've got 3 pertaining to just the agenda in general. The ones that are from the 7A are going to be pulled because that's now a moot point. So let's start with Emma DeRock.
Oh, I'm sorry. I wasn't sure what you meant by be polled. Are you going to hear from those people since they came here to talk about it, or were you going to just not do it?
All right, but I'll do them here in this part of the meeting.
Okay,
then, because we don't have that part of the meeting.
Thank
Aye.
you. Got it.
Good morning.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Emma DeRock, and I reside on Kissing Rock Road here in Gold Beach. I'm speaking here today as I have filed for a position on the Fair Board. As such, I'm looking to you to help the Event Center and the Fair Board thrive with the appointment of board members that will bring fresh perspectives from the taxpayers while remaining relatable and accountable. This opportunity is important to me as I travel from one end of the county to the other, working with and communicating with members of all areas of Curry County. Sorry. About public infrastructure and public services. Engagement in health and sustainability in our county is a conversation that I often find myself a part of. I filed for this volunteer position because I feel in the Event Center we have a sense of urgency to protect and enhance such an asset to our environment. The Event Center itself has the opportunity to drive waves of economic and community development throughout the county. Citizens from Harbor to Langlois want to see more cultural diversity in events and sustainable buildings that will host these events now and in the future. I envision better use of space with adequate audio, video, and common services you would typically find at an event center. Community-driven events where nonprofits, clubs, and volunteers want to participate year-round. An environment where the volunteers are empowered, acknowledged, and valued. The Fair Board has been making great strides towards improvement and growth, and I would like to be an asset to that momentum. In the best interest of the Fair Board and our residents, please consider appointing myself. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you.
Miss, I'm sorry, could you give your name again, please?
Emma DeRock.
Thank you very much.
Commissioner.
Next, I have Gordon Clay. Good morning, Mr. Clay.
Good morning.
Gordon,
For the
would you-
record, my name is Gordon.
Would you pull that one microphone down?
This one?
Pull it down. There you go. Thank you.
Okay. For the record, my name is Gordon Clay from Brookings, Oregon. Thank you for postponing the appointments to the Suicide Council until after the close of applications on January 16th of 2020. That will give every person who is skilled and familiar with the suicidality issues in Curry County in one of the 14 categories an equal opportunity to apply for and be appointed to that position. These categories are law enforcement officer, first responder, either EMT or fire, medical doctor, nurse, hospital board member or community care organization member, social worker, therapist, counselor, or peer support trained in suicidality, substance abuse recovery, youth education, elder services, juvenile programming, veterans programming or services, as a city mayor or administrator, a tribal community member, faith-based community member, youth ambassador, media, and 3 lay people. Go to the Curry Commission, the county website, print off an application, check the other box, and write Suicide Council, and then write which position you are applying for.
Thank you, Gordon.
That apparently isn't being done on most of the applications to date, so we're not sure where to place them. My second point, did you pass out the handout, John?
Yes, I did.
Thank you so much. There will be a mental resiliency for first responders training January 14th and 15th of 2020 from 0800 to 1700 hours and here's the confusion at this moment, in either Eureka or in Dublin. And at 4:38 this morning, I got a response, yes, and she didn't say which one. But I have been working with Kimmy Scott, the Emergency Services Manager of Del Norte County, for first responders in Curry County to take this training. These opportunities don't come around very often. The cost is $120 prepaid by January 7th of 2020. And you see the application there. I think in what you do the first of every meeting is report what happens with first responders. The police are number 6 in professions that commit suicide. And as you will read through this document that I gave you, this is a really, really important process for them and the people around them. And to get another state to allow and support Oregon people to do this, I think is phenomenal. So I will get, hopefully there's going to be a notice for me when I get home which one it is. I think being in Dublin, it might be really crazy because that's east of San Francisco, but Eureka I think would be very possible, and I think just having first responders in our county attend this training will lower the risk of, or will increase the opportunity for them to be with us for a long time.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
You were going to Dublin, Ireland, were you, sir? Thank you, Gordon, for all you do.
If that was a possibility, if that was a situation, I would love to find a grant for it.
Next, we have Drew Farmer.
Morning, Commissioners. I'm Drew Farmer. I'm from 5th Street in Coos Bay. I'm the Director of Bay Area Enterprises, and I wanted to introduce myself and my agency as a new community partner in your region. In Coos County, we've been operational since 1986. We support individuals with disabilities in their employment goals, and we recently opened an office here in Gold Beach at the old cannery building around September's timeframe. Currently, we have 3 employees operating out of Curry County. I have 64 operating in Coos, and we're anticipating comparable, slightly smaller growth here down in Curry to serve your population throughout the entire county. When we provide services to individuals with disabilities, many agencies focus on a particular subcategory of disability. Our agency focuses on a broader scope definition. So in addition to working with individuals with developmental disabilities, we also work in the mental health field. We work with folks who have had workers' comp claims, need to get into a new line of work. We hold contracts with vocational rehabilitation and your brokerages that provide support to individuals with developmental disabilities. And we also service veterans with any level of service-connected disability. And aside, I would like to thank you for your recognition of my brothers and sisters who have served and don't always come back. So thank you for that. Yes, sir.
Just real quick, I didn't catch the name of your company. Could you repeat that?
Bay Area Enterprises. I have a couple of brochures here. I'd be happy to give you them, but Bay Area Enterprises.
Much appreciated.
Yes, sir.
Brochures are accepted, surely.
Thank you. We may come up later. We have applied to procure the janitorial contract should you choose to take it out of house sometime down the road. We currently have contracts with the DHS building here in Gold Beach. We have that for 6 years. We intend to be here in the long term. And we have a contract down in Brookings with the Employment Department. Also, we're working with vocational rehabilitation to obtain clients who would like to do something other than janitorial services. And we try to facilitate anything an individual would like to pursue.
You have three employees in Curry County now.
Currently 3, yes, sir.
Thank you. That's wonderful.
All right, thank you. Tracy Garner? David Barnes?
I'll pass on this until we come to the workshop. Thank you.
All right, next we're going to move on to our quarterly reports. First up, we have our district attorney, Mr. Dial. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. Thank you. Nice to be here, commissioners, and see everybody. We, at the DA office, we start early because we have to get into the office before 8 o'clock. All filings for the night before are due at 8:15. So I'm often, and my deputies are often calling victims before 8 o'clock in the morning to try and get more details about whatever happened the night before, so we get those charges into the court in time. This year we filed so far 144 felony cases. That's up 9% from last year.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you. How many?
144 felonies.
Wow.
And 486 misdemeanors. That's up from last year as well. Just some anecdotes. We had a fellow named Cecil Wright who last year pled guilty to theft in the first degree, which is the felony theft, C felony. And the judge always tells him you get up to 5 years in prison for that. But since 1989, the judges have to follow a guideline that the legislature passed back then, which limits their ability to sentence in felonies. And so for your first theft one, you typically get anywhere between 10 and 30 days in jail. And so I think in his case, he got 18 months probation and 10 days in jail, which is the guideline sentence. The voters, of course, didn't like that, and they passed Measure 57, which increased penalties for repeat property offenders. So while Mr. Wright was on probation, he then was arrested because he threw a rock through the windshield of a truck of someone he knew that was crossing the bridge here in Gold Beach and put a big hole in it, and the driver had his 2-year-old in the truck with him at the time. The victim in the case was in Arizona, and I had called him 2 or 3 times to make sure he was going to come to trial. He said he would. Josh ended up Josh was going to try the case on the day of trial. He showed up before the trial started, went into Josh's office, asked if he could go out and have a cigarette or something. Never came back. Disappeared. We've had witnesses not show up on the day of trial. We've never had them show up and then disappear, but that's what happened. So Mr. Wright's criminal mischief case went away for throwing that rock. Mr. Wright then got angry at his cousin, Larry, and went over to his aunt's house. There were parked there 4 vehicles. There was a Land Rover. He broke out 6 of the 8 windows on the Land Rover because he was angry at his cousin. He then broke out the windshield of a Dodge pickup truck and a Mitsubishi Lancer, and then he destroyed 2 tires on the Honda Civic that was parked there and menaced his aunt and essentially went ballistic. We had that trial, more than $3,000 worth of damage. So it was criminal mischief in the first degree, which is a felony vandalism charge. That did go to trial. The witnesses showed up. He was convicted, and he got 36 months in prison. So this was just a couple weeks ago that Mr. Wrights is having a little time out in his because of his crimes. One of my other deputies, Cassandra, recently had a trial on a car theft, a UUV for his car was stolen from an elderly man and his niece who live in Port Orford. And the defendant, Justin Venn, was found guilty by the jury in that case. We had a rather unusual case as well as she did where a fellow, it was a misdemeanor, and this fellow had some kind of problems. I don't know what it was going on, but during the ride, he was arrested for disorderly conduct. On the ride to jail, he kept putting the seatbelt in the back seat around his neck and telling the deputy he was going to hang himself, and they pull over and stop him, and he ended up fighting with the police who didn't want him to hang himself, and he was convicted after trial as well. We had Mother Deputy Kevin Kelly recently had a trial on a repeat offender who was just did a hit and run and hit a car. We had one fellow, we don't normally get very large sentences on misdemeanor cases, but when the person keeps coming back over and over again, eventually the judges get tired of that and they do get a sentence that fits their history. We had one fellow, Jeremiah Lewis of Port Orford, who had multiple disorderly conducts and multiple charges, and he got 6 months in the county jail. We have another fellow named Shelton that I did a trial on recently who was arrested for shoplifting and trespass at one of the grocery stores here in town. I can't remember if it was McKay's or Ray's. They'd take him to jail. The jail would let him out because it's a minor charge. As soon as he got out of jail, he went back to the store and shoplifted again. He was arrested 4 times on the same day because every time he'd get out and go back, the 4th time the jail finally kept him, and Judge Margolis gave him 390 days in jail for his repeat behavior. He'd gotten out of prison not too, he got out of prison when he got a 5-year sentence before that for a burglary that he committed. Yeah, Commissioner Pash.
I have one question for you on that topic. What would you say is the single biggest reason for those releases? As a guy gets
Well,
arrested for burglary, shoplifting, whatever.
It's always been space in the jail, but when Lieutenant Espinoza came, they set up a matrix system, and so they have some kind of a point scale that they use as well.
Okay. Would you also say it's funding?
Well, sure. I mean, everything's funding.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. So we have some pending case. Well, we had another interesting case. We had a gal named Tony Burdick who was a fake dental hygienist, would actually create fraudulent diplomas and so on so she could get a job at dentist offices. And I don't know how good she was at it, but anyways,
evidently not very good.
Seemed a little risky. But it was kind of an unusual crime, so we gave her DA diversion. She pled to a felony, and that felony actually had a prison sentence behind it, and we put her on a diversion and said, don't do this again, and, bail laws and so on. She went down to California and straight away did the same thing. Did it in several places because she got found out, and then she'd moved. She ended up getting arrested in Butte County and convicted there for that, and eventually we got her back, and she was sentenced to prison last week.
Probably doing a denture service now.
So we
you
get
know,
to pay?
there's other jobs other than being a dental hygienist, I suppose. We have several trials pending. We have one that we've alleged the fellow was deliberately having unprotected sex, and he has HIV. We have one that was a shootout with friends shooting at each other and hitting each other up in Agnes. We've had a couple cases of people driving over 100 miles an hour. One of them set for trial where the driver eventually crashed his motorcycle in Port Orford and broke his girlfriend's ankle in half. She, however, does not want to be a victim in the case, but he set it for trial, which is surprising. So a typical day, I brought in Monday's docket that we had. So this is our typical, Mondays are a little busier than most days, but this was, this Monday we had a fellow charged with sex abuse in the first degree. We had a woman named Clyde who has some mental problems, charged with trespass, a number of counts of that, and improper use of a reporting system. She kept calling 911 to report that Judge Beeman and President Trump were underneath her trailer or somewhere around there, under the trailer or in the cupboard or something. And
Exciting.
so it's unfortunate that Oregon does not have mental hospitals anymore, and that, you know, the mentally ill get routed through the criminal justice system. Generally, we try to just get them on probation, get them mental help, if we can. That's our goal. Occasionally, depending on the crime, we can get them committed to the state mental hospital, but as you know, there's not many beds up there, and so that's difficult as well.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand what you said. Why?
There's not many beds at the state hospital. There's only one, and that's only for the criminally insane. It went from 800 beds to 300 beds recently. So there's just not much space up there.
Why, do you know why the beds were reduced or drastically?
I do. If you want to talk to me when I'm done, I'll be happy to tell you. We have another fellow, Mr. Martin, charged with reckless driving and criminal mischief in one case, trespass and criminal mischief again in a second case, identity theft in a third case, where he was forging, I should say, we're alleging that he was uttering checks. We have another, Mr. Shelton that I mentioned that got the 390 days. He's back again on an aggravated harassment for spitting on jail guards. We have another woman with a theft charge. We have another woman with theft of a U-Haul truck charge. We have a number of probation violations, more other trespass and identity theft charges. All of these, and I can go on for quite a while, all of these were just in court on Monday on status checks on their cases to whether they're going to go to trial or plead out. As well, we have a number of juvenile delinquency cases that we heard this Monday. Fortunately, none of them were too bad. I think there might have been a shoplifting case and a bunch of marijuana juvenile cases. So that's what our day looks like and what we do. I don't know if you folks have any other questions.
Commissioner Boyce?
Just the move you made, switched with juvenile, and kind of collecting all your people together. I know you had them spread to 3 different floors in the courthouse, and I'm just really kudos to you and Director Lang for really maximizing, being more efficient on space. And I can't imagine one of your key people being downstairs in the basement trying to conduct business. So,
well,
good job.
we got 2 additional offices, which was helpful. And
With what?
we got 2 additional offices, which was helpful out of the trade with juveniles. So that worked out pretty well.
I come over to kind of peek in and give you a bad time, but your windows are all opaque now. You can't see in.
Well, I'm just hoping you'll come over and help me paint.
I already said no.
Anything further?
I just have one question. My understanding is that you're fully staffed right now, is that correct?
I think, yes. We are.
Can you just briefly talk about the impact that's had on workflow and basically are you able to get cases processed quicker?
Well, it helps a lot, when we don't have as as big as staff, then it's difficult to prepare for trials, which makes us more likely to give it on cases to go along with what the defense wants, and with additional attorneys, we can try and make sure the justice gets done. I mean, it's just a matter of ability to do things, to get ready, and so on. Our days are pretty busy.
I think that's interesting because a lot of people may not realize that by not having the resources to fund you or to provide for those staff, that it really does result or impact on criminals being slid through the system without justice.
Well, sure. There was a time at one point where we had stopped filing on trespass twos, which is trespass on property, and just because we just decided we had to cut some stuff out of disorderly conduct, and we had angry people calling us, why aren't you doing that? But it was just a matter of resources.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Edward.
Next, we have Facilities and Maintenance Director Eric Hansen. Morning, sir.
Good morning, Eric Hansen, Facilities Director. As for my quarterly report, such as follows: many unforeseen projects reared their ugly heads this quarter. The sheriff informed this department that a medical center needed to be built into the jail basement to allow an outside health provider contractor a base of operations on site. We had been doing this with county nurses, et cetera, and now apparently we're searching for an outside medical contractor for the inmates. We were able to provide this space. It was 360 square feet with full sink and clinical capabilities. With the in-house construction capabilities, only the sheetrock and electrical were contracted out. This is a huge savings on an unforeseen project. The clerk's renovation continued after an expensive abatement procedure was completed. That room was the old Xerox and smoking room for the main floor of the courthouse. That Xerox machine required plumbing through the floors and a huge amount of power availability. It also stained the walls and ceiling extensively. That is now a comfortable break room and supply storage area that the clerk and elections can share. Now that we have a new facilities employee, we are able to cut costs on hiring outside contractors. The planning building department has gone through yet another major change, the third change this year. The furniture and mountains of file cabinets have all been moved again, and numerous electrical and communication IT upgrades have taken place. We're still waiting for the required new switch needed for the IT expansion. At this point, the most accessible office we have to accommodate the public is vacant. The juvenile and the DA's offices, which we were previously discussing, decided to trade places in the courthouse. This is a very, very beneficial move for all involved. This required wall removals and replacements, door and window swaps, and a lot of furniture shuffling. Those departments did a lot of that work themselves in a short period of time, creating only minimal disturbances to the public and co-workers. There's still one lobby wall that needs to be built. That's in the juvenile to keep the juvenile offenders separate from the general public. It would be a soundproof lobby. During the medroom build, we were informed by the building inspector, yes, I have to get building permits too, that we need to use non-combustible wall studs from now on. Historically, we've used wood in the wall studding. Now we have to use steel. These studs are not readily available in Gold Beach, so the juvenile lobby wall, doors in the window are on hold until I can create a supply chain of steel studs into Gold Beach. The last vendor that was using them was the hospital. When the hospital was completed, they quit bringing those into Curry County. November's storm prediction gave us a chance to be proactive in our preparations, and we had no damages. The crew did have to go onto the courthouse roof during peak winds when I noticed a clogged scupper was overflowing. There was a dead crow lodged in the downspout. Also, an abandoned cable from the new communications dish on the courthouse roof had come loose and was slapping against a judge's window on the top floor. This is another example of the unforeseen circumstances that keep the facilities department on their toes. With the budget adjustment of moving the annex HVAC replacement costs into the facilities contingency budget line, the facilities budget is back on track for the rest of the year, barring any other unforeseen circumstances. This is another example of why it is necessary to maintain a contingency line in the facilities budget. You have probably noticed a new face in my crew. Chet Brewer is the new Assistant Facilities Director and is learning a huge amount in a short amount of time. Please introduce yourselves to him when you see him. He does better at remembering names than most of us. Welcome him aboard, please. Our custodian has requested a severe cut in his hours. He was going to retire, now he hasn't. He's a hard one to nail down, but he requests only working 2 days a week for the entire campus, jail, and South Annex, and that's physically impossible. So I need to reach out to the board to allow me to employ an outside contractor. Mr. Drew Farmer, Bay Area Enterprises, Council, and myself have all negotiated. We've reached the agreements. The contracts are in place. So this will make a seamless transition from our lack of a custodian into a very sufficient, well-qualified. They're also a QRF, which is provides a lot of union. It prevents them from going to the union desires. There will not be any backlash from the union when we hire a QRF, which is a state certification. I have some contacts with people in Salem, if Mr. Farmer would like to speak on that.
If you have an interest, I can explain the QRF process.
I just have a question for Mr. Hanson.
Go ahead.
Is that all right? Okay, thanks. Controlling cost. I'm getting different stories from Terry, not from him, but just regarding his contentment with what we have going on here. And I think related to that in your department, I've always had very high regard for your work and your successes and your longevity here. When we hired Chet Brewer, and I think this is a good time to ask this, but we hired Chet Brewer, I thought he was going to replace you at some point. And now we have 3 on the program for facilities and maintenance. Granted, some extended projects out there, but that's another employee that we have, and as commissioners, we've got to look at that. And so I just need you to clarify.
I understand. Chet Brewer is the only full-time facilities employee besides myself. Tad works 4 hours per day for facilities. He is employed by the Sheriff's Department the other 4 hours. This is the first
We're
time.
still going from 1.5 to, Tad's hours are not cut back. We're still going from 1.5 to 2.5 full-time employees.
Correct.
Bringing on Mr. Brewer. Okay.
Correct.
Okay.
And that has been in my 5-year facilities plan. We have access through cutting costs, et cetera, to create a new payroll position without requesting any more funds from the general fund through savings in our department. A lot of that we realized through not needing to hire outside contractors for our building and major projects. Also, with the transition, if you so choose, to BAE for custodial services, there's a substantial savings there as well, as compared to Terry's wages. There's, I believe, 6,400. Okay, here's their monthly cost would be $2,666, where it costs us $3,264 for Terry with all of his benefits, et cetera.
That's per month?
That's per month.
Thank you.
Annually, it would be a savings of over $6,000.
Mr. Chair, can I get those figures one more time here? $2,266, and 3, what was it?
$3,264.
Thank you, Mr. Hance.
Commissioner Gold?
I just had a quick question about the steel studs. Are they required for any new remodeling or new construction?
In public and commercial buildings, yes.
And I would assume that their cost is significantly higher than wood
Negative.
studs?
Negative. They're approximately the same.
Oh,
Yes.
okay.
Yeah, but we don't grow steel here, we grow wood, right?
Pretty much Home Depot and a lot of the big carriers carry that stuff, so
Yes.
they're easy to get. My question tags on to Commissioner Boyce's, because it was my understanding when this board looked at hiring your, gosh,
Replacement or?
I was led to believe that it was your replacement as well, and that you had an exit strategy of several months, and then he was going to be taking over as the director. That's what my understanding of this, of the bringing him in was for.
Everyone needs to have an exit strategy. You're partially correct. Also, we are saving the county money from not having to pay outside contractors.
No, and I understand that, but what I'm saying is when you came to the board and asked to bring him in, there was some conversation about you having an exit strategy, having several months to show him around and teach him what he needed to know so that he could properly take over your position, because there's a lot to learn.
Yes.
And it was my understanding, and I may be wrong, but it was my understanding that within several months, you were planning on retiring and he was going to take your position. Was I wrong on that, or?
No.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure so that we're all clear, that's all. All right, is there anything further? Thank you.
Down with steel studs, huh?
So they're cheaper.
Wow. I think the number may have been a little off on the quote there for ourselves.
So,
Of course, everything we do, we always work with the agency we're working with, and we can negotiate things differently, but the last number I'd seen from my staff was 3,600.
That's including materials.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Okay, I'm
Those
sorry.
were just labor quotes.
It just concerned me,
labor costs.
we might have
No,
been on different
no,
page.
that
Okay,
was for labor.
I apologize then.
Oh, so apples to apples, it's basically the same cost?
Yes. If you throw in my budget for janitorial supplies, because the higher cost includes all janitorial supplies and equipment.
We get a really good deal on janitorial supplies, so we supply those when we get a contract.
And my budget line for janitorial supplies is $7,600 annual.
So apples to apples, it's the same cost for both. Okay, thank you, sir.
yeah, that helps.
All right, next we have Parks, Josh Hopkins. Mr. Hopkins is not here for his presentation. Let's move on to discussion action items. We have pulled 7A. We will move on to 7B. Approve purchase 2021 Kenworth T880, day cab chassis and 2021 hydraulic 2-axle transfer set. Everybody hold your breath. $237,421. Signature authority to the roadmaster, Mr. Christensen.
Good morning, Commissioners. Curry County Roadmaster Richard Christensen. Yes, the Road Department is looking at replacing a 1998 truck and with a newer truck, but we're also looking at adding to this truck a transfer. So this truck will be able to pull twice the amount of, when we have storm events, of storm debris, slide debris. It'll also be able to be used in our paving programs, in our shoulder rocking and rock programs. So the truck will, with this trailer, be more efficient and effective than our existing equipment trailers, which we sold. We auctioned one off this year, which was our belly dumps. In the belly dumps, you can't put slide material and storm debris in, but you can put rock and asphalt in. And so this truck will also become equipped with tarps that are automatic. Well, they're not automatic, but they're operator truck operator operated to cover our asphalt, because a lot of our asphalt work is emergency in the wintertime, and we have to transfer our asphalt over long distances. In winter conditions, asphalt cools down, and by the time we get ready to use it, it's not at its optimum temperature sometimes. And so this will help us be more efficient with our materials as well. And these trucks come with tailgates that have 3 sluice-type hand-operated gates, so our staff can more precisely download asphalt in small patches, so we're not wasting material and dumping too much. When a truck driver just raises the bed and you open up the tailgate, you can't really control how much actually comes up, especially when the material starts getting cold. But so this truck, I had $180,000 in our budget to cover this truck, and which does, but this transfer is another, $50,000.
But you also sold a bunch of used equipment this year for much, much more than you intended to get for it.
That's correct, and I'll talk more about that. Earlier this year, Commissioner Pash asked me to look at our fleet to see where we could downsize, and so our team looked at all our equipment and what we weren't using as much as we could, and so we actually had budgeted to auction off about $25,000 worth of equipment this year, which was the estimated cost for a trade-in of our old equipment, backhoe and excavator, for a new backhoe and excavator. And instead, going through public auctioning that equipment plus additional equipment, we auctioned off about $83,000 worth of equipment this year. So we're way above budget on that. We're doing really well. And so we're just looking at replacing our equipment for our 5-year plan, the current plan. As these trucks are getting older, they have less value, and currently we believe we could sell this truck on public surplus locally for $20,000 to $30,000. We feel there's a high demand for this truck, and we also have a high demand to replace this truck because of its age and maintenance issues, maintenance costs. And it's a perfectly good truck right now, but emission laws are changing, and so we need to start looking at Tier 4 equipment because, for instance, in California, in Oregon soon follows California, one of our new hires, our operators, let me know that in his county they had an older truck like ours, and they were only allowed to use it for 200 miles a month. We put over 200 miles a day on our trucks depending on where we're working in the county. So right now it has high resale value. It's in good operating condition, and it's in our 5-year plan. It's in our approved budget, and we'd like to move forward and replace this equipment with your approval.
I make a motion. I'm sorry, did you have some question? Go ahead. Go ahead.
Thank you. Hey, I really appreciate your time yesterday. Very helpful, and I don't think you have a bigger fan. I thought a lot last night and after our discussion, and I've supported all of your equipment purchases. People drive by and they see the new cars over in the parking lot and they don't understand. And when we communicate that the county's in a pretty difficult position and has been for how many years, and the whole finance aspect. One of my uncles told me a long time ago, be careful when you're in business not to spend $500 to save a nickel. Now, I'm certainly not attributing that to you. But this election year coming up, silly season is going to be upon us, especially at the national level. We don't have a lot of good confidence, I don't personally, in where the economy is going to go. We're in a pretty high part of the wave right now. And that is just a tremendous amount of money. And if despite how good a job you've done in explaining it and the rationale behind it, it would be hard for me to communicate that to a taxpayer who says, You know, there's only 21 employees down there. There's only 270 miles of road that they have to maintain. They have 5 dump trucks. So what I'm going to ask you, Roadmaster Christensen, is to consider bringing this back in 6 months and look at, you know, where we're going to be, or even a few months with what's around the corner. These are tough times out there, and so we've got to justify that to the public. And you know, the commissioner's getting hammered on some real or perceived expenditures and hires. It's pretty public. A lot of it's invalid, but we still have to be accountable for every dime that goes out of this program. So, and that's no reflection to the contrary on the efficiency that you're running and the work you're doing to maintain and improve our roads. So, I'm just asking the board. I would like to see this come back. That's bumping up against $250,000 for one piece of equipment. I'm not saying it's not justified. I'm just not sure now's the time, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Gold?
What's the trade-in value for the truck you're getting rid of?
We estimate $20,000 to $30,000.
Okay, so basically what you're short, I'm just looking at your budget. Your budget was 180,
Correct.
and so you're $57,000 off. And if you trade that in for, say, 30, then that makes 27,000. And this is a piece of equipment that's going to end up helping contribute more, or?
Yes, and so I'd like to answer Commissioner Boyce's questions and your questions. And so, yes, the road department is very conscious of the money we're spending and utilizing the road funds for road department. And I came into an environment where we haven't replaced equipment for years in a timely manner, where we run things into the ground. And so I'm not just looking at today, I'm looking at the future, where we need to be, because I agree, funding in the future we don't see it on the horizon. And right now, the road department has saved millions of dollars on holding on to its equipment forever, for downsizing its staff, and I've not increased the road budget at all as far as buying this equipment. What I have done is I've cut our overlays, our paving projects, from $1.2 million a year to around $600,000 a year, so I could have that $600,000 to buy equipment. And we're making up that difference by increasing our chip seal program, and we're doubling our miles of chip seal to get more new wearing surface and extend the life of the roads. And so nothing's changed as far as my budget or any previous roadmaster, other than we are paving, contracting out less overlay, and we're trying to replace our equipment while we still have road funds. And the issue is that we used to have 3 divisions with 60 people, Port Orford, Brookings, and Gold Beach. We just have one now in Gold Beach, and we drive to the furthest ends of the county, and we mobilize all this equipment, all these people out there, and it takes 2 hours. You go set up a job, boom, equipment breaks down. You know what? I've lost all that time and labor and other projects that we could have done. Now, we lost efficiency, effectiveness, we lost money, and also, too, is we've had plenty of safety issues with older equipment, and God forbid anybody gets hurt. So in order for looking at the future, for us to be most efficient and effective as possible, we need good new equipment. And this equipment may never be replaced in the future, as we will not have these road funds possibly in the future. So we got to look at today and tomorrow and position ourselves so that we could be able to take care of these roads as best as we can when there's a lack of road funds.
I want to ask you, because there's a transfer truck that goes with this as well, how many round trips do you think your trucks make in a month? One truck makes in a month a round trip? Meaning from the yard
really
to your
varies.
job and back. I'm just saying on an average.
I couldn't tell you honestly. You know, we
Would
concentrate.
30 trips a month be a dump truck?
Well, the
That's
dump
everything.
trucks do many different things, and so I couldn't answer that question.
Okay, what I'm trying to say is because you're going to have the transfer truck behind, you're basically doing 2 loads for one.
One, yes.
So rather than the driver having to unload or load something, go back to dump it or pick up, and then go back, you're doing basically 2 round trips in one, which in essence is going to cut the bottom line of your payroll, your wear and tear on vehicles.
Absolutely,
Yada, yada, so.
especially in emergencies when it comes to, landslides and storm debris. We're currently, the truck just runs by itself. This truck, we'll be able to do 2 full loads with one truck. And so that's what we're kind of looking at.
And you're getting rid of a 23-year-old truck.
A 1998. And
So 23 years old because it's a 2000.
currently, that's the plan, but this truck, if we order it today, won't be delivered till May probably. It takes a while to build it, and we would look at all 5 trucks, and the most effective truck or ineffective or whatever would be the one we sell. But right now, it's our oldest truck, the 1998.
Commissioner Gold?
Does your motion still stand? I second that. It was to purchase the truck.
Further discussion? Roll, please.
Commissioner Gold,
Aye.
Vice Chair Boyce,
No?
Chair Pash,
Aye.
motion carried 2-1.
All right, at this time, we're going
Very
to take a 10-minute recess. We'll be back at 10:21. All right, we are back in session. It is 10:22 a.m. Coming back into session, we need to clarify something from our consent agenda that we need a motion to approve the remaining items.
So I move that we approve the remaining items with the exception of H and I. Those were the only 2 things that were
Right.
taken off.
Right. Do I have a second?
Second, Mr. Chair.
Further discussion? Roll, please.
Commissioner Gold,
Aye.
Vice Chair Boyce,
Yes.
Chair Pash,
All right.
consent agenda carried unanimously. Well, no, yeah, unanimously.
Okay, this is to be done in executive session, Ms. Schmelzer,
The corrective action plan,
for Terry. That was put on my desk.
oh, for Terry, that will be after, under the 11B.
Right, that's what I was, okay. I just saw something pop up here, so.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to move to 7B. We already did that one, sorry. 7C, corrective action plan, Ms. Harvey?
I always have such a challenge with this equipment. I got to bring it down to how short I am here. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for your time today. I'm not sure exactly what to go over,
For
except
the record, introduce yourself, please.
this is Sherilyn Harvey, the Finance and Human Resource Director for Curry County.
Thank you.
In my time in the office, I became aware that the county was on the current state's delinquent filers list and had multiple years of insufficiencies and weaknesses in the financial processes within the administrative office. I went and met with the state auditor's office and discovered that part of the requirements is for the county to do a corrective action plan where the finance director would come before the commission and say, here's the results of our audit, here's the things that we need to fix, here's how I plan to correct that, do you approve? The commission would make a decision if they feel that's a good idea for the plan that she presents, or he, and then they would by resolution adopt a corrective action plan. I didn't include the rules from the state on the, did I? Sorry, I did. Actually, if you look in the back, the Secretary of State, Oregon Audits Division, Municipal Audit News, that's the procedure that's been in place for a number of years. This says since 2018 that they formalized it in the newsletter because they realized that a lot of municipalities weren't aware of it. So they revisited those things and restructured it and cited their ORSs and things for doing it. At this time, the county has those kind of errors in the audit findings. They're documented back to 2015 and cited as repeat errors. So I worked up this corrective action plan that's pretty lengthy, that covers all of the material weaknesses and insufficiencies for the county, and am recommending that we adopt this plan and require that other departments comply with it. And then what happens is when we have our audit, because it won't happen for the 18-19 year if we adopt it now, then when we have the 2021 audit, the auditor would be responsible for evaluating how well we performed under the corrective action plan that we choose to adopt. So it has to be done by resolution and by consensus, and then it has to be sent into the state audit office. It's supposed to be done within 30 days of the findings, and so we're a few years down the road. I did go to the state and had a meeting with the auditor's office, and I might have, in one of my packets, I guess, for my report to the director, I included a communication from the audit division saying exactly what the findings were and what the recommendation was for working with us to complete it. So they extended our time, but we need to have it done before the end of December and submit it to them.
Ms. Moser?
Charlene did share with me the information she received from the state, as well as examples of the correction plans that were submitted to the state in the past. She shared her proposal with me, and I don't really think we have any alternatives. We need to fix the problems. I agree with the procedures that she's outlined, the way to correct the errors, and my recommendation is that we proceed and approve the corrective action plan.
Commissioner Gold?
It was my understanding that the previous finance director filed a complaint plan of action, and all that was necessary was for the BOC, or the Board of Commissioners, to approve that.
Unfortunately, it wasn't approved through the legal process.
Right, it wasn't approved
And
by
the auditor's office had been working with her to recommend other solutions, and one of the requirements was to present that plan to the board.
Okay.
And that's why when I presented this, I provided a resolution, and I also provided the state's requirements for what meets a corrective action plan, and so that you can have credible resources. I understand that you're getting two pieces of information, so I qualified mine by providing supporting documentation from legislative resources. Some of the suggestions that were made in the other plans provided a crossover of internal controls. So for example, if you're the person that says whether or not somebody can have a grant, you shouldn't be the person that's overseeing the finance portion of that grant. In the plan that I've proposed, this returns grant authorization to the board, and it also provides administrative oversight by the finance office and requires department heads to supply the needed information for the person in my role to be able to make credible decisions on grant management. There's been quite a significant errors in several areas for those, and they've been going on for a few years, so I incorporated suggestions for those in this corrective action plan.
Okay, I kind of have another question. Where are we with this year's audit? Because I called Roy Rogers, and he said all we needed were the final financials. Do we have those yet, so we can get...
Unfortunately, our auditor has not been in communication with me. I have CC'd our Director of Operations in my recent attempts for that, and we had a meeting with my liaison and our Director of Operations trying to get to the bottom of some of the problems that are going on, and I have had zero response. So the next week's meeting that I'm having, I'm going to submit the other piece of the puzzle for the OpenGov that we're getting ready to go into, and an RFP for a more for a different auditor that will have a better, well-defined relationship of what we expect from them.
Because we have a contract with this current auditor, and I didn't have any problem at all getting through to him, and he was very responsive, and so.
That's wonderful. I'm glad for you. Unfortunately, we didn't have the same experience, and if I may say am I accurate in that Director Schmelzer and Commissioner Pash did not have the same success getting in touch with that office that I had.
Charlene, so as Commissioner Gold said, they're looking for they said they couldn't do anything until we had the year-end financials. Do you know, have those been prepared?
They have not. Our year end for 1819 was closed against my specific direction, and now we're struggling to wrap it up in light of the closure in the software. In addition to that, there's a CFA report that needs to be prepared, and I have previous finance director's draft of that. This is my first time preparing those, and I've tried to reach out to other departments to see how to do them. And one of the requirements is that you list all of the revenues from state and federal resources. You identify those revenue streams with their codes from federal and state agencies, and then you summarize the expenditures related to that report for each line of revenue. And I'm struggling to get that information out of Excel. Again, we all know that I'm not an accountant, I'm a public administrator, and I have had a challenge with our software. However, I've been trying to work with the resources in our office and our staff to collect that information, and they're also struggling to help me be able to provide it. Yesterday, I found a draft from Louise, the previous finance director for ICFA. It was in progress. It was incomplete, and it didn't conform to the policies I got from the state of Oregon and the code subsection F for the federal government for reporting, but she was more of an accounting mind. So I submitted those documents to Julie Schmelzer and to our finance department team to ask them to give that to the auditor, because I can't seem to get them to get in touch with me just to try to wrap things up. I want to emphasize the county's been late. I believe the state said the last 5 years. Our report's due by December 31st. I've been working for you since July 29th and only had 2 opportunities to communicate with our auditor, and one was in a meeting with my liaison and my director of operations. Beyond that, I haven't had any other communication.
Yeah, because I was told that upon having those final financial reports, they could get right into it.
That's
and get it
wonderful.
done.
I wish I
So-
had heard from them and had something from them directly. However, I have had 0 communication since my employment.
I'd be happy to contact him again if we had
Well,
those reports.
I don't think it matters because they're not ready.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they
So
need to get
we're-
ready.
Yeah, so we're at the point of figuring out the technical part of pulling the line item revenues forward. That's something I have never done before, and Cena's working on that right now, and I was trying to get technical support from Cassell to help us do that, and they're not able to pull it forward. And so I'm not really sure how to handle that. I was trying to reach out with the auditor to provide them what we do have. Cena's working on pulling the numbers forward right now. One of the problems, to be quite frank, is it's my responsibility to be confident that the numbers that we're pulling forward is accurate. And in the information in our financials that I've dug into, the currently adopted budget and the grant administration line items are not accurate, and I don't want to sign things that I can't be confident is accurate. I'm
Commissioner
sorry.
Boyce?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. 2 parts here, as quick as I can go. Just verify, when's the last time you had direct communication, well, for that matter, any communication with our auditor?
In my meeting with Commissioner Pash and Director Schmelzer, we had a table meeting with the owner of our auditing firm where we had this discussion.
Owner of the auditing firm. I just want to slow this down a little bit, make sure I'm following you. You're doing very good. But you said that Director Schmelzer, Commissioner Pash, and yourself could not get, and maybe I misunderstood, could not get a return correspondence or
That's
phone
been
call.
supported with
Is that true?
emails that I've reached out to them and CC'd our director with.
But Commissioner Golden could get through. I don't understand.
First call.
So we did have a meeting, it was a couple months ago. It was a phone conference with the chair, the finance director, and myself. That was a couple months ago. Since that time, I know that Charlene has tried. I know I have tried. I don't know if Commissioner Pash has tried since then. But I do know my impression is they don't want to work with us until we have the data they need. There's really nothing they can do until they have those year-end financials.
And that was my impression also.
Yeah.
So when, may I
So
ask?
that's why I think they're not returning. I'm sorry.
Okay, I'm sorry. Can I ask when your call was?
You know, I'd have to go back and look at look at my emails, because I had several emails going back and forth
was about 3
between
weeks
Roy
ago.
Rogers, and I think I copied you on them
Was it a
also.
week ago, 3 weeks ago?
No, probably about 3 or 4 weeks ago. Not,
That helps a lot, because until this moment, it looked like there's some behind the scenes going there that some would have access. I've stayed out of this, but I'm very concerned if you didn't have access, and if you didn't have access. I think that's clarified. I'm not completely satisfied, but something doesn't seem right here. And I know that she's made consistent efforts to get in touch with our auditor. And I think we need to get to the bottom of this perhaps at some time. And at some point, I know they're waiting for us, but I don't like what I'm hearing. I'm very uncomfortable, Mr. Chair, that's all.
Thank you.
Also, if they are waiting for information from us, I have never had an auditor not communicate that to the person in charge of overseeing the audit. In none of the environments I've worked with, I have not received any correspondence from them.
And of course, you have records of all your attempts, I'm sure.
I've shared them with Director Smelger.
You made that point. Thank you again.
Sorry. And again, remember, I am not an accountant. I am a public administrator with bookkeeping experience and financial administration over offices. My previous audits are published. They're matter of public record, and they're clean, and I did a good job. So I propose that it is the dynamics of the circumstance and my limited skill set possibly for preparing the reports Director Gold brought up, but it's not being done, and I want to remind the commission that 5 years running, the county has been late with their report. The reports are due December 31st. They've been received May or not at all. We're on the delinquent filers list because they have been received not at all for 2018, and I resolved that for you. So I'm trying to own where we are in this, but I also want to point out that the current circumstances, I firmly believe, are not directly related to me. My skill set may be contributing to their response, but at a professional courtesy, they should have at least provided an email to me that said I need exactly these items.
I agree with that. Yes. All right. Commissioner Boyce?
I want to keep the discussion going, Mr. Chair, if we can. I want to reiterate the problem statement for the
Okay.
public. And of course, the more times generally I read something, the better. Hopefully I can follow what the meaning is. But the problem statement that you've identified here, and I'll tell you in a minute, I'll follow up with why I'm going down this path. The 2016, 17, and 18 audits were filed late with findings and without the required auditor's communications for 17 and 18. The county's finance officer failed to file a complaint plan of action for each year's findings. Curry County is on the state delinquents filers. To remedy these circumstances, Curry County must, adopt and implement a corrective action plan or plan of action. One more quick paragraph, Mr. Chair. Observation, the county is currently working with limited software. No, I don't need to go into that. Where I do want to go, though.
There's a typo. That's not supposed to be complaint. It should be compliant. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Well, thank you for that clarification, though. All 5 of us, or at least the 4 of us, this is our responsibility. I've been here 3 years, so I probably have as much or more responsibility as anyone. When I first got here, Gary Short was incredibly helpful on any questions that I had to get me up to speed my first year as commissioner. Sorry to see him go. I don't understand all the reasons, but I put him pretty high on the chart of responsible public servants. And then we had David Marshall, who wasn't here very long, but good soul, and I recall he was kind of overwhelmed. And then we had Louise Kallstrom, and when she decided to leave, I sent a sincere recommendation to my friends, county commissioners in Columbia. But I did have some issues with her, and I was public about that. Most of it we were able to resolve. Commissioner Huxley certainly had issues with her. And now we have our 4th person in 3.5 years to run the finance office. So, like I said, I've kind of stayed out of this last year. I've been very happy with your involvement as liaison and Do I have that right? You are the liaison. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yes. And certainly you coming on board, Director Smelzer. We hired you to find the holes in the ship. And that could even be pointed back to the commissioner's office, holes in the ship. We want to hear that. You mentioned a forensic audit yesterday. I just want to give you the support and the encouragement, and that's why I think this conversation needs to continue, because it is apparent, not apparently, it's pretty evident to me that we have some real issues here, and we need to get to the bottom of it. And that's part of our job, and it's not a fun part of our job. But to the extent this is valid, what you've written here, and that's very easy to verify, how do we pull everybody together and get it done?
I so much appreciate that question. I want you to know that the items that I have on your agenda today are just two elements of my full recommendation for the county to address what's happening here. You have had a large number of finance directors, a huge turnover there. And if you have one or two people leave, I can understand that. But I believe that it would be in your best interest of the citizens to get to the bottom of what's happening here. So the corrective action plan, combined with the RFP, if you notice that for the next week's agenda, I'm going to have it on there, is very strategically worded. It's a very specific plan that extends beyond a normal auditing contract that involves engagement of outside parties to evaluate specific items within the county and develop procedures. There's also a firm called, and I understand we have limited resources. I have a plan to help with that too. But there is a firm called Marina Plus Company that is off of the I-5 corridor that I met at the Government Finance Officers Conference, and they specialize in helping counties who, if you'll forgive me, have become to an ill state, clean up things, strategically reorder their organization, and give advice to develop policies and procedures that will align systems in a more efficient way with state and legislative processes. So I tried to negotiate a contract with them for under $10,000 because of our financial situation. They first agreed. But after I shared the status of the county's current financials with them, their rate increased to $24,000. I'm going to be seeking a grant to see if I can help you get those. But again, I want to revisit where I started with this. There is a significant concern over paying $50,000 a year for software, which is coming next on this plan. My recommendation is the corrective action plan, a strategic relationship with a new auditor that clearly defines specific terms of that relationship and says that we only renew that contract when they successfully meet the terms of each year. For example, timely following, successful communications, qualified reviews, and communications with the Director of Operations and whoever you have over finance. The third thing is the OpenGov software. I believe that it's prohibitive of county operations for department heads not to have immediate access to their finances, to not have year-end results done within the end of July, at very minimum the middle of August, and to not have quarterly reports that allow these department heads to know exactly what's in their budget. Right now, we have fees and fines, we have invoices that we're trying to pay that came through from May and last year's bills that were not covered under the previous direction, and our new budget was adopted without incorporating these expenses. I am left cleaning up a lot here, and it's weighing on me professionally. One example is I'm responsible for auditing grants and providing pull forward numbers to the people that are in charge of those. I asked the Director of Wally House to send a communication to you guys to let you know where we are of that, because her board became involved in the poor oversight of that grant. The team in my office had tried to go back to Louisa's spreadsheets and to Cassell to resolve those issues, and I had to insist, I became rude, I'm not well liked here right now, that we go back to source documents and the original budget for that grant. And when we got to the bottom of it, the IGS had been misadopted into the budgets 2 years running in a $1,300 error, and the payroll expenses were off by $6,000. So there are many things that need to take place to clean this up. The corrective action plan is my attempt to try to give a bigger picture strategy for aligning those things. OpenGov is a way for department heads to immediately see what your finance team has entered in their budgets and decide if it's right. We can evaluate each other's work, right? Checks and balances. It also gives us an ability to be transparent to the public. They're going to see the taxes that we get from them, how we use that money, and how our operations are providing services to the public. That's why I'm recommending that, and I understand that it is a large expense for you guys. But I believe that if you reorganize, which is next week, the finance office, I will be presenting a proposal for that. You can have 2 people in the finance department work under Director Schmelzer with the OpenGov software and disseminate part of those responsibilities back to the department heads and give them internal procedures to be able to manage what they're trying to have control over. It will reduce county expenditures by no less than 40% and improve efficiency.
Okay, thank you. Director Schmelzer?
Just as Charlene has explained, we have a lot that we have to fix. The corrective action plan, of course, will not meet the deadline that we were given to submit it, but if we can get it adopted and approved by December, we're at least on the right track. And we'll just have to start moving forward with what is in that. In my opinion, we need to move forward with the recommendations on how to correct the deficiencies as outlined in that plan.
So, Martin, did you have a comment on this? Can we consolidate on these since we've already brought in the OpenGov?
We can possibly.
I'm David Barnes. I've read the correction action plan. I've also read all the audit reports for the last 5 years that the counties had done. I'm an auditor by trade. I read these things for fun. They're really boring reading, though. I don't recall seeing that any of the deficiencies or weaknesses that we had were overly significant. There was a lot of small things that add up to things, and that's why they weren't corrected from year to year. These have all been brought before previous commissions. You know, one of the matters of keeping checks somewhere where a person who has signatory authority also has access to the checks. This reminds me of last year when we were over across the street in the courtroom and the judge says, well, why don't you just lock up the keys? You know, if someone has access to these that shouldn't, why don't you just put them somewhere else? I understand the necessity of a formal correction action plan being required by the state auditor, but I just want to point out that there's none of these things that I noticed that were not addressed in previous audits that are of a super gross amount of money or a materiality that reaches the level of being anything that I would consider to be an emergency that it get done. Okay, that we're behind on this year's audit, as Ms. Schmelzer just said, is because we don't have the paperwork to give to them yet. So whether they're contacting us or not, if they contact us and we don't have the paperwork to give to them, we just go from the contact list and go back to the bottom of the list and try us again in the cycle. So I just want to point out, you know, nothing here is that earth-shattering. It's nothing that the county is going to, I don't feel, suffer great loss on. So I just wanted to point that out. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I guess I'm a bit nervous. I might be seeming a little emotional about it, but he is correct. If you read the corrective action plan, there is nothing that says there's a huge amount of money being mismanaged here. There's just an incredible amount of mismanagement operations, errors within the office that haven't been caught before. They have been caught in the audit, but haven't been corrected. So I apologize if I'm being nervous.
Thank you. All right, so do we have a motion?
So moved, Mr. Chair.
And what is your motion, sir?
To approve the action plan and correct the deficiencies.
Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Further discussion? Roll, please.
Commissioner Gold.
Aye.
Vice Chair Boyce.
Aye.
Chair Pash.
Aye.
Motion carried unanimously.
Let's move on to 7D, OpenGov software proposal. Ms. Harvey?
So this just kind of leads back to what we were just talking about. The software will take us from $1,100 a month to $3,750 a month. The 5 years down the road, that software will be at $5,191 a month. in light of the $1,100 that we're currently paying for the operations that we have. I believe my administrative brief outlines some of the benefits of that, and I want to mention that these projections within this proposal include the current recommended staffing. So the cost at the end of it says that we have a new clerk, we have an AP clerk, we have a payroll coordinator, and we have a finance director, and we have a treasurer. That's all been included in this. So when we're looking at this, keep in mind the bigger picture of what those budgets entail, because this only talks about the personnel cost of those positions included in contrast with the software. There's still a significant savings when you go to page 4, but it won't be seen until the 21-22 year. And then that year, the savings would be $32,830 and increase gradually as we go along. But it's more of the bigger picture of what this software provides to the county and to the public.
Aren't there also fees that will be saved during the demonstration to us? They said there were fees that would be saved like through credit cards, through those kind of things.
Yes, so right now we're using credit cards to pay bills. And instead of that, there would be procurement cards where department heads would be using them, and the internal control for those with all the levels of fraud and the late fees and the interest rates and all those associated fees. Those are covered within the open gun system, and we would be relieved from those.
Carolyn, does this, and my understanding is this software can also do some functions that we have been doing manually in the past, such as this year we started tracking the transient lodging tax collections, and then we've also been looking at the business licenses. I know we sent out letters, I think, to 400 businesses. And that's all being done manually right now on a spreadsheet.
Yes.
They have a component for that, correct?
They do.
And that's no extra charge, right?
Yes.
Okay. And then with the building safety, I know currently we have a system, we have a free system from the state for permit data. I know it has some limitations, but this would also be able to do the building safety, the planning, and add in that code enforcement arm. And if we would take back public health, some of the public health rules as well, correct? The tracking?
Yes, the building and permitting, if depending on which option we choose, could be a little extra cost, but they can integrate into the current Acela system, or we could pick from several different opportunities they have before you, so you could control that. There is grant management, asset management. The cloud storage gets us off of the county's current server issue. Our technical support is through them. I negotiated this contract with this company. They have went out of their way to try to accommodate our financial state. They agreed to not increase the software more than 4% annually. They agreed to divide our deployment costs are significant. They're $80,000 because they come in and take very good care of the converting of your Cassell system into the OpenGov system. And they divided those at no interest rate, no penalties, no service charge for doing it. The deployment cost over 2 years for us. Then I went back and said, we need to let go of Cassell because we can't afford to pay 2 software subscriptions at the same time. And they said, we'll absorb those costs for you. So in the contract that we have with them, we have a cap of 4% annually for the subscription to increase. They've divided the deployment cost at no extra charge to us to accommodate us over 2 years. And they are paying for us to keep Cassell live for a clean conversion.
So a couple more things that I'd like to bring awareness to this board that I'm sure the board probably already knows, but also the public. One of the best parts to this program that I see are the amount of hours it's going to save with our basket, as so to speak, where purchase orders, those kind of things are all handwritten and submitted to department heads, and then they're forwarded to our payroll, or I mean to our accounting office. And then sent to 2 or 3 different department heads and or elected officials for approvals and signatures, which will now be done at a click of a button at someone's desk, and then forwarded in an email to that next department head. One of the other things I think that is going to make me sleep better at night is the transparency that this will offer to everyone in the county, because all these budgets will be available to each department head. And as Ms. Harvey said a while ago, They can do their quarterly adjustments. They can do forecasting. They can keep with what, as we are developing right now, a strategic plan. Department heads, elected officials, our director of operations can all go into those departments at a click of a button and make sure they're following our strategic plan, that their budgets are being followed over a period of time, that they're not in excess in any ways, and if they are, how to correct those actions. What the software, in my opinion, can do for this county will save this county tons of money, much versus the $40,000 hit we're going to take the first year and the $10,000 hit we're going to take in the second year before we get in the black. Commissioner Gold?
Okay, I kind of looked over this very, very carefully, and one of the first things that hits me is the total cost of $338,000 over 5 years, and then also the startup cost. We just took out a loan for $57,000 to fix our phones. So then I guess my question is, where are we going to find $54,800 to do this right away? And so then I started looking into Cassell, and I just have some questions about that. Are we currently using all of the possible modules that are available on Cassell?
The finance office 2 years ago elected not to upgrade the county to the modern Cassell Connect online version, and as a result, they're still doing payroll by hand.
So question, what would that cost to update?
We didn't get the quote from them. We had a presentation in here that showed the contrast between the Cassell's best case scenario. We're still producing reports in Excel. They don't have any budgeting software. And the other opportunities like working with the public and being transparent are eliminated. So the cost wasn't given to us with that. We looked at the difference between the two softwares when we did the contrast.
Okay, I do know that we put our monthly financials on the website. And
Yes.
then I have another question. How often do the department heads come and have to ask CENA for information during the middle of the month for where they are on their monthly? The monthly isn't enough for them.
I don't have a number for you. What I would say is that it's a part of our culture. We've had Cassell for 20 years. It is the culture of this environment that they just know they have to do business without the information they need. So they're operating on their best information that's provided monthly through the share drive.
I can comment on that too. As a department head, I can comment on that. Because you do not, I hate to admit this, but because we do not know daily where we are at in our budgets. There are two that I know of that keep their own separate little spreadsheets. One person had their daughter develop a spreadsheet that they could track their purchases on the side, so they know where they're at. Because we do not know, many departments, I don't want to say shoot in the dark, but I think there's about 25,000 out there yet, so I'm going to order this.
It's kind of like someone with their checkbook that doesn't keep a balance?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
gotcha.
It is exactly what it's like. I'm looking at claims every day that exceed line items, and I understand in budgeting that as long as you don't exceed the category of your appropriated
Right.
budget, you're still okay. However, there's no information to know what comprised the number of the line item. What other expenditures do they have that they're expecting to come out of that budget that lets them know that the bill that's twice as much as they thought it was going to be is okay to take out of that line item? Does that make sense?
Yeah,
There's also
I
no
understand
internal
that.
tracking that says, here's all the money we owed, and here's where we paid it. That's how bills are getting missed. We have bills that didn't get paid last year that the money was reappropriated for in the new fiscal budget without allowing for those expenditures.
Okay, so are we going to be able to try OpenGov before we buy it? I mean, someone actually go in and use it? I know they came in and demonstrated, but a demonstration is kind of like having someone tap on a computer and say, oh, here's...
We did have workshops and stuff to let everybody know how it is. We
Did
have
they
the
actually
city
get
of
in to try it, though?
No, the staff were not allowed. We don't have a way to do a dummy environment where they train. When OpenGov does the training, they will be coming here. But we did take them to other departments, and one of the finance directors from an agency in Texas who's used it for a number of years came and demonstrated internal use and showed them how to dig into it and how their daily duties would be accomplished.
Okay, so I guess the big overall question I have is, and I'm not done yet, what does OpenGov have that Cassell does not have?
Okay, let me try to summarize it for you. That's a great question. OpenGov gives department heads controls, commissioners controls, and it improves efficiency and cost by letting you know exactly where you are the day after you've made an expense in your budget. It produces transparency. The public can evaluate our performance and how we're using their money on a daily basis from our website.
Okay, so you can't do those things with Cassell?
No, ma'am.
Okay.
And it independently produces reports, manages budgets, creates summaries, partners with finance for internal controls, does grant administration, asset tracking, which we're currently not doing. The current Cassell system is stored on our server, which we all know that we're having trouble with. The OpenGov contract says we have unlimited cloud storage space and technical support within the cost of those contracts that people are concerned about. Those costs are incorporated in that contract and are removed from our current system. So that alleviates part of the problems that we're having there. Technical support is available to every single person that has access to the budget. If our department heads have a problem, they call an 800 number and get walked through how to fix it and learn what they need to do.
So do our IT people need to be involved since
No,
it's
they were
cloud-based?
invited, but they do not have to be involved, and they will not have a part in what
Okay,
we're
and then
doing.
just one other thing, I'm sorry, but I did call Klamath County, and I talked to their financial person because I wanted to know, hey, how is this working? So he said that they had purchased OpenGov 3 years ago, but they only purchased 3 modules, the budget builder, the transparency, and the workforce. And I understand that's like the overlay. Okay, and I don't know whether we could do that, if it would be cheaper. And then last year was the first time, after 3 years after purchasing, that they had used the budget builder. And he said that it went fairly well and it seemed to be user-friendly, which is a good thing. He did not know what the cost of the modules was because he hadn't been there very long. So would it be possible? It seems like we're just hell-bent on, excuse me, I just swore. We're just bent on doing this right away. Does it have to be done right away, or could it be wait until the new budget year?
So, thank you. First, that was a very prudent evaluation. I want to thank you for doing that. I want to mention that this hasn't been done right away. My first quarter with the department, July through September, I did research of multiple systems, 12.
Oh, I'm not disputing that you didn't do the
So,
research.
Then we did outreach for internal stakeholders. We went out to the public. We did workshops. I presented reports at 3 of my meetings before this commission. And then if we, just for a thought, if I'm understanding correctly, you're saying you're concerned about the cost? If we purchase just those modules that you're referring to, that's like buying icing for a cake that we can't afford to support in the first place, right? So the cake itself, we need the meat, the accounting software, those tools that get us our daily business practices. We need them timely and accurate, and we need our department heads to have access to know what their budgets really
Okay,
are.
and I'm not disputing any of this. What I'm disputing is it's not budgeted for this year, and if we have to borrow money for a telephone
Agreed.
system, how are we going to pay for this?
I agree.
So there's a couple other things. You mentioned the servers. The pressure off of our servers, I think, is immense because when I started here, within a month or so, our servers crashed.
It was $250,000.
$250,000 if our servers blow. So this is going to take all of this off the servers and put it on the cloud. Another thing we have to look at that I don't know, as you did mention, is the payroll capabilities of this. And you don't have to do the timesheets anymore. How many hours a week are spent over the entire county filling out timesheets, approving timesheets, moving them to department heads and getting those approved and then sending them on to payroll? If we look at this entire program over its full run course, the hours that are going to be saved in the PO process of getting purchase orders approved, getting them in the basket, getting them to the department heads, getting those signed, and going in handwriting or going and hand filling out all the documents for that, and getting the proper officials to sign off on those before we print checks. The payroll things that we're going to gain from this, the credit card services we're going to save from this, I think it's going to turn out to be, I hope, a win-win for the county. As for time in our meetings with this company, they did say that this takes about a year and possibly a year and a half to get fully instituted.
Yeah.
They don't want to shut down, of course, Cassell. They're actually going to come here for $80,000 over that period of time, a year to 18 months, and make sure that everyone is completely up to speed on this program before they pull the plug on Cassell. So I'm very confident in the management of this company, the people that have come here to meet with us, and what they're proposing to us. I'm extremely confident with that. I do want to share one more thing that I have in this pile of paper somewhere. Zach Bookman, who is the CEO and founder of this company, is a Yale School, just so everyone here knows, this isn't a company that was just a couple of people got together and put together. His graduation is from Yale School, and he has a software master's. His career history as a CEO and founder of OpenGov. He also has a bachelor's from the University of Maryland and a master's degree in Harvard School, John Kennedy School of Government, and Technology, Software Industry, and Application Software. So there's a lot of cities and organizations, counties that are already running the software that I have been on their website, and I know websites can be leading in one direction. To find the software very proactive, very aggressive in keeping up with changing environments and governments, and I'm excited to see it here.
Commissioner, I would just like to add too, I know that we have asked Charlene to look at efficiencies, cost savings, ways to improve the way we do things, ways to eliminate human error. And I know she has been targeted and criticized by some for how aggressive she has been at meeting those demands put upon her. But I do want to just add to this. This is something that past committees have asked us to do. And I'm just going to, I have a file on my desk from the previous county administrator, and there's a file called Big Ideas, and there's another one from some previous committees that looked at how to make government more efficient and function better. And there was also a group formed this past year called the Citizens Revenue Task Force. And they stopped meeting in spring, but one of their ideas that they had proposed to make us function better and have long-term cost savings was to explore software and a better way of doing our budgeting processes. So this is in line with those some of those past efforts that we have solicited ideas for.
And again, I just want to reiterate, you may be the person that is put on this with the plus or minus to it. But it is something that if someone would have came to my office and presented to me as a software system to bring into this county, I would have applauded it either way. And to see that just the transparency of this for department heads to see next morning exactly where they are to the penny on their budgets and be able to plan from there, and to put that with our strategic plan through our director of operations overseeing that, through our finance department overseeing those things alone, to be able to make sure that every department is following the procedures for the strategic plan and their budget that was proposed and adopted through this board, to me is a win-win for the county.
So then I have another question. Oh, sorry.
Commissioner Boyce?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well said. I want to break it down just a little bit. Here's a good analogy, and it's fresh in all of our minds. We just authorized, I voted opposed, but in the long term, I certainly would have supported. We just authorized a 5-year investment where this $230,000, $40,000, whatever it is, dump truck, double dump, will pay for itself in 5 years. That's our responsibility. I think that's what we're talking about here. You bet it's a scary figure. But when you look at it in a real fine assessment, I'm getting more comfortable all the time. Thank you for negotiating a good deal with these folks, and I think that's valid, and I think it's going to pay dividends for us. Quick email I got from Klamath County Commissioner Derek DeGroot. We are generally happy with the program. It did take a while to get up and running, but the availability of information to the public, and you just mentioned transparency, you mentioned it too, Director Smelter, transparency. I'm going to read that again. The availability of information to the public has been good. And then he just says hi and let me know if you need anything else. So finally, anyone could answer this. Are there any departments that would not benefit from this or not would be thoroughly involved? I think I asked you that, but I can't remember if I did or not. Of all the county departments, are there any that would not be really part of this whole process and program?
The departments that will not have, for example, the tax assessor's office, there's an element to this, but their software and the currently way they do their business is not going to be incorporated into it. They feel that their software is better. OpenGov didn't even bat an eye. They can integrate our general ledger and our transparency, all the budgeting software directly into that.
Correction though, that's on the assessment and taxation.
Yes.
As far as his department budgeting and those items, they would still be going through this
Yes.
software.
And I learned yesterday after a manager's meeting that there was a need for a GIS service. And they sent me a link to show that there's a mapping. It's not the same as the GIS service already built into this. And then he mentioned it's really impossible for them to convey all of the benefits of their software because there's so many components that are included in what we're already paying for. And he sent me to a link to purchase a software that will integrate with OpenGov to provide those GIS services that we need at a low cost. So while that's not on the table right now, I just want you to see that the benefits of working with them extends beyond what I've been able to communicate. There are many facets of this software, and the benefits for the county are exponential. Also, we're currently paying $1,100 a month for Cassell to live life as we all know it. What we're talking about really is $3,750 a month. That's only a $2,500, sorry, I know I should know math, right? That's not a very big difference for the life that we're going to have within this environment.
Commissioner Gold?
Okay, back to the money. Are we going to have to come up with 54,000, is it 800?
So
immediately,
OpenGov
or
actually worked with us because I mentioned that to them. And what they did was they prorated the first year services through June 30th. So we can pay a reduced rate the first year. I believe the total between the first half of the deployment cost and the subscription, it's in my proposal.
It was 23 or 24,000.
Beg your pardon?
I think it was 23 or 24,000 was the prorate.
Yeah, 54,800, and that includes prorated, yes, 24,000 for the subscription, 24,800, Commissioner Pash was right. 40,000 is the first half of the deployment. Remember, their hand-holding and the service agreement, if you read it, they ensure the conversion process. They take care of us, that we don't have problems in that area. So the second half of that, and again, they're not charging us any interest. They're working with us on it.
So it's going to take 6 months for them to even...
18.
Okay. So when would this money
Immediately.
have to go out of?
So one of the
immediately?
reasons why that I'm putting this on the board right now is OpenGov is a very coveted software. Please research it. And they're scheduling deployment, and they do not overbook themselves. They have been kind enough to give us an opportunity to be first on their new schedule in January, but they need a response from us. If we decide to wait, then we'll be put off until their team has enough staff to put us in schedule, but they do not overbook themselves. They will only schedule what they can handle.
So exactly how much money do we have to have up front?
54,800.
54,800. Okay, so where are we going to get that?
So right now there's a position on the table to hire another person in my office. The cost of that person is $60,000 a year.
So that's where it's coming from?
No, I'm suggesting this solution that would benefit the entire county is less than that.
So then you wouldn't be hiring this other person?
That's correct. That's my suggestion to come up with the money, but I'm also looking for money, if you guys would approve it, to look for grants and supports outside the system that would help us pay for these initial costs, because once we get beyond the deployment cost, look at 21-22. Our annual cost is $46,800. We saved that year $32,830 just by moving beyond the deployment cost. So I'd like to look for a grant that would help us with the deployment costs.
Okay. I've hit you hard, sorry.
No, it's okay. You're pragmatic, and I appreciate that, because whatever you're asking, there's 45 citizens out there thinking the same thing, and I want you to have confidence in the decision that you make.
And I will say, I did look on Klamath County and looked at their transparency issue and people being able to access the financials, and it looked nice.
There is a whole list of government associations. By the way, one of the gentlemen that came here, he used to be the city administrator for City of Ashland. And go look at their website and their transparency. It's beautiful. That's one of the things I presented for this team earlier in the workshops that we held.
Mr. Barnes, did you have a comment on this?
David Barnes again. I've worked in a lot of software programs as an auditor over the course of time. I went through the tutorials on this one, and it looks like a beautiful program. It'll do everything that you want it to do. I am concerned, as Commissioner Gold mentioned, I am also concerned about the cost of this. You know, it's just more money, and every time I come to this room, it's more money and more money is going out the door. I'm concerned that there was no talk with the people at Cassell, because I know that they have updated their programs as well, and I'd be curious to know if Cassell offers an update that offers the same things that OpenGov does. You know, they're not the only player out there. There's other people who do this. I respect Sherilyn. She said she went out and spoke to a bunch of people. Shell Megson mentioned on break, you know, the money on this one, this really ought to be going for an RFP, shouldn't it? At $300,000, you know, I would think that would meet the level of requiring proposals, looking for bids on it. Just because you have to do this by January to get on their schedule, I really don't think you should rush this. I've watched too much rush stuff happen in this room that's ended up costing us a bunch of money. And as Commissioner Boyce stated earlier with buying the fire truck, maybe we sit back, maybe we look at this, maybe we talk about this for a few more months. This is a big chunk of money. The only way that this saves money is if you do not hire a new person for the finance department. That is where the savings comes from. Is the offset of that money. I looked into this, and I'm looking at the tables that Sherilyn provided in her packet, and it shows the cost savings. And when you look at the bottom of it, as we get up further out in the years, the cost savings increase every year. Those cost savings are derived from a reduction in the cost of materials and services. I don't know where that comes from. How does your material and does this software actually drop the cost of your materials and services that you would have to hire out? Because that's the only way I see this money increasing on this. This is essentially whatever this costs us a year. Well, the only money we're saving on it by not hiring another person. And you know me, I'm definitely against hiring more people around here. But, you know, I have to question this. I have to question whether Cassell couldn't provide the same amount of stuff to us. You know, we really need to compare apples to apples, like you mentioned earlier, Commissioner Pash. We talked about, you talked about the process that things have to go through and the length of time and the manual processing of issues. Mr. Dial was in here before, and he mentioned how in the entirety of last year, the Curry County District Attorney's Office prosecuted 144 felony cases. If you go to Multnomah County right now, the assistant district attorneys up there each have a caseload of 144 active cases. So for us to still be on paper, we're still pretty far behind, and you know, I don't necessarily see the value in changing that, you know. That's about it. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Just a comment on. Respond really quick.
1 second.
I just want to respond to one of Mr. Barnes' comments. We did, Charlene, Chris, and I can't remember who else was in the room, had met and discussed with Cassell what their capabilities were and did ask them, can you do this, can you do this, can you do this? And they could not provide the same thing. So there was that discussion, and it was clear that even if we implemented stuff they weren't doing right now, they just don't have the capability to do the same functions.
And I just want to state, I was in that conversation, and I will verify that they said a lot of these functions they could not do. And this isn't something that we just, for the public to know, this isn't something that we just, you know, came up with a few weeks ago. This started back in July, I believe it was, where we had our first talk about this and started talking with companies, not only on the phone, but actually having interviews and meetings on the phone system with different people on this. So it's been something that's been continually going on for a period of time. If I could, Commissioner, she wanted to make a comment first.
Okay, that's fine.
Go ahead, Ms. Harvey.
I just want to thank Mr. Barnes. Those are very valid points that he mentioned. I was going to mention what Julie Schmelzer had mentioned about Cassell. We did fully vet Cassell and compare it with OpenGov. The source of the savings, he's correct. The cost savings is reducing. I just wanted you to notice that is within the context of the current employment environment. So those savings include budgeting for people. I just wanted you to realize that the title of that says current environment. We can make amendments. I'm even suggesting that the finance operations could continue under Director Schmelzer by eliminating my position. My salary and my base pay altogether are costing the county $89,000 a year. So if she can manage finance with 2 or 3 people under her that are paid less, then consider that savings alone for the county, and all of the departments did still get all those benefits. With regards to the procurement contract, we did vet that. It is within our contract that we were able to do this specific contract and stay within the county's rules.
Okay, Council Huddle?
Right, so there's a procedure, there's direct contract, there's intermediate procurement, and there's RFP that Mr. Barnes, request for proposal that Mr. Barnes used. For contracts like this, anything between, I think, $10,000 and up to $150,000 is what's called an intermediate procurement, which is you obtain 3 competitive quotes, and it sounds like from the description, the group, and in particular, Ms. Harvey, obtained at least 3 different vendors and got ideas from them or perhaps quotes of what they could and couldn't do. So it seems like this would fall under intermediate procurement, as long as we're not locked into the 5 and that we can get out of the, I heard, again, I've been working on some other stuff, but it sounded like it was about $300,000 over 5 years or something like that.
Yes.
But if we can get out of that, it's not a $300,000 commitment if we're able to terminate that during the contract course.
Yeah, so that's the total number
Yes.
that we're looking at there. So the big heavy part is just the first 2 years, and that's the part I'm asking to seek out grant opportunities for.
Okay.
Ms. Harvey, did you have a comment? Or, I'm sorry.
Megson.
Megson.
I apologize that I did not put in a comment slip prior. I do have a few questions. For the record, I see this.
Your name?
Oh, I'm sorry. Shalia Megson. I live in North County. I do see this as a very big expense over the existing. However, you guys know me. I'm a techie. I think we have needed improvement. We have seen some improvements from like the old job that I used to have. We're using technology. So I don't want you to take that wrong. I very much, I have looked at the software of what I could gain online. I did go look at Klamath County and seen what they were paying and how long they've been doing it, how long it took. So now that we've got it out of the way, that I look at it like, wow, that's a huge price tag, because we're going to be roughly paying per year the same that Klamath would be paying, but yet our population is at a third. And we have 25% is actual households. So that's a lot of data that we'll be dealing with, that they deal with for the same price that we'll be paying. So now that I've got it out of the way, on the side that I really love going forward and getting a more modern approach and a lot of transparency and real-time expectations out of our software and out of the finance department reporting. Once I go to there, what I did was look at the contract itself. I keep hearing 18 months, 18 months, 18 months. Inside the contract, it does say 1 year. So the things that I'm saying here are suggestions just from me for small alterations in the contract. So instead of saying 1 year, and we're being prorated on the $80,000 upload cost, almost $80,000 because they give us a credit of $7,700. But since we are having that prorated or split up over the 2 years, then why not have the contract say 2 years? I also see that, yes, we would be expected to come up with $50-some thousand immediately, but in July, we have another $100-something thousand. It takes us almost up to $200,000 within one 12-year or 12-month period, one annual year. The other thing that I saw was that within the contract, it says that we as a county would be responsible for all their travel, hotel expenses, meals, and I'm hearing that they will be here for 3 weeks. For the $80,000, I was kind of hoping that that would be included and that we would not have those extra expenses, because that can get up there. And I'm sure that there's something else. But the one question that I had that came into my head was that it has been said that if we did not hire an extra person in the finance department, that this would be able to relieve those funds so that we could use for the immediate payment of getting this into the county. Is that already in the budget? Does that really exist, or was this something else?
That position was, the board approved it after budget, so it was a addition to the budget.
So it's in the current budget?
It was not budgeted at budget time. What they did was, maybe about 2 months ago, they approved adding the position.
Okay, well, in my mind, once they approve that makes it part of the current budget. So that answers a question for me. Just those couple of suggestions, if we can extend the time a little, and if we can get us not responsible for their travel. Like I said, I don't like the cost, but I really, really, really think we need the modernization. Thanks.
Thanks, Julia.
Call for the question.
So do I have a motion?
So move, Mr. Chair. We accept the OpenGov proposal as, including the two presentations we've had the last two consecutive meetings.
Do I have a second? I'll second. Further discussion? Roll, please.
Commissioner Gold?
I'm going to have to say no at this time because I think it needs to be postponed until next budget year.
Vice Chair Boyce?
Yes.
Chair Pash?
Yes.
Motion carried 2-1.
Next, we are moving on to F.
E.
Or I'm sorry, E, to approve the contract. And I will say what Ms. Mason just said to me. Honestly, I will be forthcoming that I didn't read that language in the contract. I know this has a timeline on it, so it's important that we get it done pretty quickly. But I think we need to make sure that everything is satisfactory on that.
Charlene, have you had a conversation with them about the mileage, lodging, et cetera?
No.
I do know that it was on record, or at least in our meetings, they said many times up to 18 months.
Yes.
And
That
now-
may not be reflected in the contract, but
Yeah, because what they're doing is offering the deployment within 12 months, but what they were making a personal commitment was, they'll stick with us for 18 months outside of what they've cost us for to make sure that we're up and running without any technical difficulties. The deployment is expected to occur within the 12 months.
let's do this. Can we possibly put this off? We're close to lunch here. Move this off to a little bit later after lunch, and maybe during lunch you can try and get a hold of them. Council raised his hand.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I mentioned the intermediate procurement rules, if we could get out of the agreement anytime. This says subscription start date 1/1/2020, subscription end date 6/30/2025, and then it talks about what the contract term is, and it says that the contract term is specified in the number of years on the order form, and to me that would specify. There's a question whether it specifies 5 years because they break it down into each year with a billing date. And so I think if Finance Director Harvey is going to be contacting OpenGov, we ask them about the ability to, if it's a $300,000 contract, truly a 5-year contract, then under the state procurement rules, we would need to do an RFP or make findings for a reason why we're not, and we don't have those findings prepared. But if they would, because it says we can only terminate prior to the renewal time, which would be the, again, if it's 2025. So it's a question for clarification. Is this a 1 year with 5-year renewals, or is this a 5-year? If it's a 5-year, we might have to modify, so you might check with them on that.
I did. So part of that is in the negotiations that they did their presentation. They want to make sure that we're happy with us. So their pricing agreement is a guarantee for 5 years. However, the contract would need to be renewed each year if we're happy with their services. So the contract is written correctly.
So what about the travel? Can you ask them about
I
that?
did not ask them about that. You want me to quantify
Here's what the travel does say. It says that OpenGov will invoice customer for pre-approved travel expenses incurred in connection with each
Yeah.
statement of work as they are incurred. So it assumes that there's some pre-approval by us of their travel, and I don't know that there's any travel budgeted in here, pre-approved. at this
There
time.
isn't. They said that if that became a situation, because they do reside within Oregon and within traveling distance, that they would request for circumstances.
Can we get that clarified maybe
Yes.
during lunch, and we'll bring this back after?
Absolutely.
Okay, so we're gonna hold off on this.
Tell me why we're Tell me why we're bringing it back, so we can address thoroughly the travel portion.
So we can address the travel portion of it, yes, and well, it's already been clarified on the contract. It's a 1-year annually renewable contract. So pretty much, I think the travel portion of it, to make sure that we're not going to get stuck paying with all the travel.
They want to make sure we're happy with us, so the contract was written for those dates.
Okay.
I understand, thank you.
Thank you. All right, so next we're going to move on to F.
Said that backwards, sorry.
Next, we're going to move on with F.
Did we do a vote? Oh, we're bringing it back. Sorry.
Next, we're going to move on with F. 3 members to the Fair Board. Ms. Schmelzer?
Okay, so we do have 3 openings on the Fair Board, and John Jesuit, our administrative assistant, has advertised for those positions. He has received applications. We do those have been given to the board, and we are asking for a secret ballot on that vote. So we need you to vote for 3. The 3 that we are considering are Ron Burris, Lucy Levanti, Christina Brozzi, Emma DeRock, Aaron Johnson, Ron Crook, and Rob Carrillo. So unless there's discussion, we would just like to have you do a closed ballot on that, secret ballot on that, and tally that up and make the appointments.
Where do you want us to send the ballots?
To Ms. Schmelzer, I think would probably be
Okay.
appropriate. Since there's one. I'm not done mine yet, so if I can find it.
While you're looking, you're going to be missing those late Friday afternoon accounts payable baskets, aren't you?
Yeah.
I think that's the plan, part of the process.
Drum roll.
Oops.
Well, we have 2 members for sure.
Okay.
We have Christina Brozzi and Rob Carrillo. There is no other member or no other applicant that received 2 votes. So we'll have to narrow it down and re-vote to try and get 2 votes. Christina Brozzi and Rob Carrillo. So I would like you, I'm not sure if you have another piece of paper you could use, or if there's another ballot in front of you, but I would need,
Take a scrap sheet of paper.
sure, if you take a scrap sheet. I need you to vote amongst the following for the third position.
Thanks.
Okay, I need you to vote.
I'll just use the back of this.
Over there, they're all the same color.
Oh, that's right, we don't want it to be different.
Right.
So this is for the third position. I need you to vote between Lucy Labonte, Emma DeRock, and Aaron Johnson. So our third member that the board wishes to appoint is Aaron Johnson.
Okay.
So we would need a motion in a second to make that official.
Do I have a motion?
I move that we approve Christina Brose, Robert Carrillo, and Aaron Johnson to the Fair Board.
Second, Chair Pash.
Further discussion? Roll, please.
Commissioner Gold,
Aye.
Vice Chair Boyce,
Yes?
Chair Pash.
Aye.
Motion carried unanimously.
Next, we are going to move to
H.
H, which is approved change orders for Brookings Head Project.
Head Start.
Mine just says Head Project. What is a Head Project? Go ahead, Counsel.
Thank you. The Brookings Head Start project is winding up, and we have some, I'll call it housekeeping matters, some relatively low dollar value change orders, $7,000 for some roofing materials, $573. Again, I say relatively low. This is a $1 million project, more or less. $573, and then $1,693 for millwork, which is cabinetry, I believe. And again, total of the change order here, $9,340.72, and requesting approval. The materials in your packet. If there's any questions, I'll answer those.
And that will be paid by All Care? Is it All Care?
Thank you. Not All Care. It's Orca.
Orca, that's
It's
right.
either, so good. It's either going to be paid by the grant or paid by Orca funds. So yes, it's not paid by the county.
So I move that we approve the change orders as written.
Second, Mr. Chair.
Further discussion? Roll, please.
Commissioner Gold,
Aye.
Vice Chair Boyce,
Aye.
Chair Pash.
Aye.
Motion carried unanimously.
I see Ms. Harvey back in here. Did you want to readdress the board, or
I have opened up, if it's appropriate, they were clarifying.
go ahead?
Actually, Andrew, they let me go ahead and step up to the podium, so I'm going to be your parrot, or you can call in on the...
Put them on speaker if you want.
Okay. Hold on, I'm putting you on speaker. Are you there?
Okay. Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Can you guys hear him?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, you're on mic.
Hey, great. So the question that Sherilyn mentioned was about the additional travel clause in the legal contract.
Correct.
And so that's for any additional scope items. So, all the deployment that we included was in the deployment plan. Any travel or lodging for anything in scope is all included in the price that we included. However, if you wanted to have extra support, down the line sometime, and you wanted us to come out on site, that's where the additional fees would come in. Worth noting, any additional charges would all be pre-approved by you, so we couldn't just, pick where we wanted to stay and then bill you. It would all be something that we'd go through a review process with the county to get the travel and the additional costs approved before anything would be billed.
Okay, and one question for the record. Would you please state your name and who you're with, just for the record?
Oh, yes, my apologies. So this is Andrew Curcado with OpenGov.
Thank you. And Commissioner Gold has a question, and then Council Huddle.
I just want to make sure that that's written very clearly in the contract so that there'll be no questions later on. Is that okay?
Yes, I can work with our legal team on that.
Council Huddle?
Thank you. Good morning or afternoon, Andrew, depending on where you are. So the question I had, the contract covers a period of 5 years, and it has billings on an annual basis. And depending on whether it's a 5-year contract for roughly $300,000, give or take, or whether it's a series of annual renewals at less than that, would depend on whether we can adopt it today or we have to go through additional statutory proceedings. If it's an annual contract with annual renewals based on the quotes per year, then we can approve it today. If it's a 5-year, $300,000 contract that we cannot, terminate without spending $300,000, then we have to go through more process. Can you kind of explain that a little bit? And if I need to rephrase my question, I will.
No, I get it, and it's a good question. So yeah, we structure the contract to be in a way that you know what the costs are for the next 5 years. That's why the billing table was on there. However, it is an annual renewal each year, so you have the ability to opt in or opt out at the end of each year.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
I think that answers all of our questions. Thank you, sir. I appreciate you getting on this right away, and we're going to be moving forward. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, so do I have a motion on 7E? Adopt and approve OpenGov software contract.
So move, Mr. Chair, with amendments.
With amendments.
Yes.
Do I have a second? I'll second. Further discussion? Roll, please.
Commissioner Gold,
I'm going to have to say no again because I want it postponed, but that's okay.
Vice Chair Boyce,
Yes.
Chair Pash.
All right.
Motion carried 2-1.
Next, we're going to look at approve 7I, Commissioner Boyce out-of-state travel request. Ms. Schmelzer.
Yes, I prepared this for Commissioner Boyce. He has the opportunity to go to Washington, D.C., and I don't want to say lobby for funds. I'm not sure lobby is the right word, but to meet with some influencers that can help us get money for some of our forestry and fire prevention programs that are in the works with agencies or organizations such as the Forest Collaborative, some partnerships or conversations he's had with ODF, and then trying to find money to help with other programs and sources that can help prevent some of the fires going on. Commissioner Boyce can clarify all that. That's my understanding of the intent of the trip. He has agreed to pay for the lodging and the meals himself, and he's just asking for the county to pick up the travel. And he's already done looked at the cost of the travel, and it's included in the packet what the overall price would be.
Thank you, Director Schmelzer.
I've read the packet.
So before I take questions,
Department of Agriculture for Natural Resources and Environment to discuss grant application Southwest Oregon Collaborative Forest Landscape Restoration Project and meet with Senator Merkley's office and potentially Ron Wyden's office regarding further funding for Highway 101 issues.
you read it right. Been a long time since I've been to Washington, D.C. I was 16. And there's been plenty of reasons to go. You're looking at the clock, so I'll make it close. The clock doesn't work. Here you go. So, yeah, there's been reasons to go, but I haven't been able to find the time and to justify the money. This is a program I've been working on behind the scenes for a lot of months. Director Schmelzer mentioned the collaboratives, the Southern Oregon Forest Restoration Collaborative. I've made some good friends there. Certainly the Nature Conservancy. They are an environmental organization that I've grown to respect tremendously because they're not anti-logging. They are anti mega fire. They are anti-poor forest management practices, and so they have been a tremendous asset to my learning curve, and not to mention, of course, the Forest Service. As commissioners, we have a lot of different responsibilities, and public safety has and comes in many forms. The Camp Fire in Paradise, California, they lost 87 people, as you know, and 6,700 buildings. Per acre, the amount of fuel we have in Southern Oregon, especially, but all of Oregon, is way more dense than what Paradise had. So this is an opportunity for Curry County to potentially get a lot of fuel abatement money. That's number one on our list, but we're also adding to that in the competition for basically $10 million a year, $4 million a year, excuse me, for 10 years with a matching grant. And that's where I've been working with Steve Byerlin on as I call him our county salmon restoration coordinator. But the money would come from the Pacific Coast Salmon Recovery Plan, pass through to OWEB through the different counties. So I'm going to meet with Jim Hubbard, who comes very highly recommended. We'll be competing. They'll be giving 2 awards, and there's 4 anticipated applicants. So I think our chances are very good, and there's a possible renewal each year in that 10-year period. In working with the local Forest Service, they want to start the roads and clear 100 feet on each side. Not clear, but diminish the 1 hour fuels on each side. So that is one of the best things I've heard in a long time. That is their goal. That is their focus. That gets firefighters in and out safely, and it opens up for recreational use, law enforcement, and certainly future timber harvest. I'll be there very late on Sunday night the 15th. I have 4 meetings. I just handed you a copy there. The other important meeting, well, I think all 4 are pretty important, but the second one on natural resources is with Timothy Williams with the Bureau of Land Management. The Oregon Department of Forestry right now is having a tremendous challenge with the BLM in contracting out their firefighting, and you're aware of that as well. And each year they're saying, you know, we might, due to the cost, which by the way, the average cost the last 5 years to the Oregon Department of Forestry is $70 million. The 5 years prior to that, average cost was about $9 million. So our fire cost, the amount of risk in this state is really going up. Not a good thing for the BLM to take over their firefighting. They haven't done that in Oregon for 80 years. And so I've been in close contact with the Oregon Department of Forestry, and this Timothy Williams, some of the commissioners in Oregon, big and small, have worked with him, and he comes very highly recommended. So I'm quite thankful to be able to have an opportunity to talk to him, and I want to lobby. I shouldn't use that word, I know. I'm not a paid lobbyist. But I want to persuade him the level of risk we have in Oregon, especially with the level we have here in Curry County and Southern Oregon, the Rogue River Siskiyou National Forest, the Kalmiopsis Wilderness. And so I do not want them to stress. I don't want the Oregon Department of Forestry and our 9 local forest departments, protective associations, distracted with, are they going to be paid, when they're going to be paid, and are they going to stay with the extensive efforts that they've made to date. So I'll be leaving late that night with Senators Merkley and Wyden, their offices. Obviously, I want to talk about Sudden Oak Death. I want to talk about highway funding, the Curry Coast Highway. There's other issues that the board is aware of. I'll conclude this way. We got a plane ticket for $509. I'm pretty giddy about that too. That took a lot of work to save the county money, but I really want to emphasize the chances that I think working with the Southern Oregon Forest Collaborative and the Wild Rivers Coast Forest Collaborative, our chances of prevailing in this grant award for that 10 years and then getting the one-to-one match because of the work that we've done with Josephine County on the fishing issues, tying that all in together through OWEB. We are due for some funding there, and that one-to-one match could mean $8 million coming into Southern Oregon. And of course, our job then would be $8 million a year would be to lobby for whatever portion we think is legitimate to come back to Curry County. So I need board approval. I've already bought the ticket, though.
I do want to say on this, I looked at your ground transportation and Uber and Lyft. With Uber and Lyft, I think you're way over. You're figuring way too much for travel, ground transport.
Well, I don't have to use the 200.
I'm just saying. I know. I'm just saying. 'Cause I couldn't see how cheap it was to get around Washington. I used Lyft while I was there with NACO, and the cab was $25, and Lyft was like $6 for the same ride. So you might want to look into those. But do you have any questions?
Are there anybody else, is there anybody else involved in this? Are you the only one going, or?
I've been encouraged by the Forest Service, all the partners. Again, I'm very impressed with the people that are putting in the tremendous amount of work on this, local all the way over throughout the Rogue River National Forest. The money will come through the Forest Service, and I hope they are in a position that they will be hiring some additional people.
So that's not answering my question.
I'm getting there.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Yes, I'm the person to go. Lily Morgan would be available to go, Josephine County Commissioner, but at this time, I'm going to carry the load.
And none of this could be done by phone conferences?
You know, if you have apprehension, Commissioner Gold, why don't you communicate that? Maybe I give you very legitimate reasons why I think this is. Are you concerned about spending $509 plus a little bit of taxiway on the chance that we might be bringing in $8 million to the county over each year for 10 years and reducing the tremendous fire risk we have here to our citizens and their property?
Just some questions. Not to offend.
No, I see the.
No, it cannot be done by telephone.
I see the value for $500 and you know the possibility of $100 or $200 in ground transportation. I see the value in it personally. So, I mean, you're with these meetings here. If we got a part of that, that would be wonderful. So, for risk versus reward for $500 or $600 on this, is it in the travel budget for the year?
Yes, it is, and this follows the travel policy.
And it follows the travel policy. So I'll make a motion that we approve this. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Further discussion? Roll, please.
Aye.
Vice Chair Boyce.
Aye.
Chair Pash.
Aye.
Motion carried unanimously. You're on your way to D.C., Commissioner.
Thanks for the encouragement, Chair Pash.
I think you have to abstain, actually, doesn't it?
Huh?
Yeah.
And I'm sorry if I offend you with questions, but
It's from what I understand, it's not a personal
Right, it's not
gain
work-
to
it's
him.
work for the county.
It's not,
Okay, so
right. It's not
I
like
didn't want to get in trouble.
Yeah. No, I appreciate it. I mean, it's a legitimate question. I'm glad you're thinking about it, but thank you. Anyway, that's the bottom line.
So before we go any farther with this, let's go ahead and take our lunch break now. We will come back at 1 o'clock and continue. Thank you.
In my mind, you're looking at another 2 years, you know, and I think that anyone who runs for commissioner in the upcoming election needs to know what's going to be expected of them. So let's put it out there. Let's say we want 5 members. This is what they're expected to do. Now, if you still want to run, run. And if you don't, don't. But at least people go into an election understanding what it is.
I don't know that, and council would know this much more than I would. Even if we were to get this on a May ballot, I still think because the nomination would be closed for that election cycle, this couldn't apply to the 2020 election calendar because once the candidates are chosen, which would probably be the soonest we could get this on a ballot would be May. Once those candidates are chosen for that 2020 ballot, the primary
wouldn't be 2/20, though, I think is what you're saying, right?
Primaries in May.
The primary closes in May, it closes in March for the May primary. Once that door closes, and council, again, I'll rely on his knowledge on this, not mine.
The clerk.
Once that closes, it could not be for that November election because those people wouldn't have a voice. In other words, they're expecting one thing and it changes to another, just like me when I ran. And then Commissioner Huxley came in and they changed this to a stipend. I didn't feel like, I should have been included in that stipend only because I had already filed to run when that was passed. That's my point.
And I think that makes perfect sense. I do think, though, that having these discussions so people know what we are looking or what direction we're talking about, and then what direction the public is going, or what the public wants to see, I think is very helpful. At least get those wheels in motion so we can start addressing it now versus later.
Sure, absolutely.
And I can ask the clerk too if I'm not sure if we can have a special election in August, or I'm not sure. I'll ask her about that. I'm not even sure if you can, but we'll just do that as part of our research and come back with all of that information.
Isn't that more money if you do an election?
It is, yep, it is.
I'm just thinking money today.
Yeah.
It's about 10,000 for a countywide, I believe, per measure.
Yeah, so that'll be part of our research is when we can have elections, how that's impacted, what it costs, et cetera. If it costs $10,000 to have a special election and you're saving $200,000, maybe it's worth it. But those are decisions that we'll have to make.
But the point is, though, if once and I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Once the nominations close in March,
Yes.
I don't think you can attach to that election cycle. And that would be my question for the clerk, since council has recommended us contact her.
Thank you.
Yep.
I think once the nomination process for a candidate stops before the primary, it cannot affect that election cycle because those candidates would be expecting something else.
Well, I'll ask her about it. It probably depends how it's worded too,
Yeah.
I'm guessing.
Could be.
But we'll look at that.
Commissioner Boyce?
Sorry. If we come into this concept that is to save money, I think we're going to go backwards. You just use the figure 200,000. That gets back to where a county administrator runs the county. And if I can just be that direct, and I'm not interested, and I'm not saying you're proposing that, of course, but I am not interested in that. I've seen the results of that too many times, so.
But another thing is to look at 5. If commissioners, like right now, you're at 210, just payroll. If you went to 50, you're looking at a $40,000 for 2 more commissioners on an annual basis. You're only looking at 40,000, and yeah, you're going to have the tax, the taxing and the PERS if people go for all that as well. But you might make it part-time.
And I will say, conversely, I've heard people that want to be active. They work full-time. They do not mind showing up. They do not mind doing the meeting prep and making the decisions. They want to serve, but they do not want to work full-time in the office. So they have other jobs. So there's a lot we have to look at here, but let's begin those discussions, and I think I have a pretty good direction from you, so I'll follow up.
Final comment?
Yep.
If we don't have working commissioners, it will not be successful. It'll just be a change of won't even be a change of direction. So they've got to want to work. Doesn't mean they got to work full-time.
All right, so I'll
They
make
got
a
to
motion.
contribute.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I'll make a motion that we direct Ms. Schmelzer to move forward with looking into this further.
I'll second that.
Further discussion? Roll, please.
Commissioner Gold,
Aye.
Vice Chair Boyce,
Aye.
Chair Pash.
Aye.
Motion carried unanimously.
Next, we have 7K, discuss liaison roles. Ms. Schmelzer?
Yes, so I just want us to begin talking about the liaison roles. I know sometimes in the past they kind of get assigned before we get into a meeting and maybe not always done in the most preferential way, or the way I'd like to see it done. I would like us to start thinking about liaison roles and make sure that we assign them in a meeting and that everyone is aware of what those liaison roles are. We can continue to assign them the way we have been, which is just kind of randomly, or we can look at assigning them by category. For example, one commissioner addresses all infrastructure-related liaison roles, one addresses all maybe law-related roles. either way, I just want us to start having the conversation and be ready to have them be ready to do some assignments early part of January, so we're not doing it later in the month. So we start with a new board and know exactly who's overseeing what.
I think the good news for this board is we already have our liaison assignments. So for future boards, when there's a new elected comes in, I think to start that process, once you have a commissioner-elect, even might be a good way to start dividing up the liaisons. But what I'd like to say to this board is if there's something you'd like to see, a liaison that you'd like to be in or not be in, perhaps forward that to you, and then we can talk with the other commissioners to find out if there's a vacancy in a liaison or there's someone has interest in a liaison that, like I know early in the year, Commissioner Gold and I changed liaisons on one thing, and it was just something that, we just did. And that might be a way that, if there's a commissioner that wants to be on a liaison or doesn't want further involvement in one of the liaisons, they could put that to you in a list form.
Sure.
And then we can all discuss it.
My preference would be to leave it as it is until we have a new board.
Oh, that's what I'm saying.
You did say that. I'm sorry.
My
Yes.
preference is to leave it that way, but if there is something that, hey, you know what, I really don't want to be on this liaison because I'm not effective, because that's, in my purview, our job is to be effective on the liaisons that we're in. If we feel we're not effective, or there's another liaison that you'd like some input in, those things we can talk about. But for right now, I prefer to leave it the way it is because this board is seated.
I'm fine with that.
Okay, so why don't we do this then? If somebody has some concerns or wants to get rid of something or add something, get a hold of me in December. If not, the liaison list is going to go as is to our January meeting for approval.
Sounds good.
Okay.
So I make a motion that we do exactly as stated from Ms. Schmelzer.
I'll second that.
Further discussion? Roll call, please.
Aye.
Vice Chair Boyce.
Aye.
Chair Pash.
Aye.
Motion carried unanimously.
Next, we're going to go into the vacationing director's report.
Okay, so I want to talk a little bit today with you about mental health and something associated with public health. First of all, our public health, in public health, we have to have a doctor assigned who's our public health officer, and he passed away this weekend, so we'll be getting a new one. Dr. Whipple passed away, and CCH is looking at finding a new appointment for that. So just so you're aware that we have a change there.
So CCH is looking at candidates, but is the appointment by the board as the local public health authority?
And
Is that,
I
I'm
sent it-
asking really?
yeah, and I asked you yesterday.
Oh, really? Oh, okay, I didn't even get to that email.
Yeah,
Thank you. All right.
I just sent an email yesterday. So we're.
Pretty quick. Things
Yeah,
are going
right
happen
now,
pretty
they had recommended a nurse practitioner, and the state got back and said it can't be a nurse practitioner, so they're looking at who they think it should be, and then council and I will look and see, does that require an appointment from us, or is it just CCH that appoints him? But we'll make sure the proper procedure is followed on that. So I just wanted to let you know, though, that he passed away, so it's pretty sudden here. Or not sudden that he passed away, pretty sudden for us to even discuss it, so sorry about that. Then I just wanted to talk a little bit about how the state does a school-based health center study every year, and what they, so what they did was they surveyed the school-based health center down in Brookings, and those services are provided by CCH right now, so I just wanted to share with you some of the findings that came out in that survey that I found pretty interesting. First of all, just on the student side of it, when you're looking at students, they asked, one of the questions they asked was, what was the purpose of your visit to the school-based health center, or what type of provider did you see? And when you're looking at the state average of what percentage go there for physical health versus mental health, it's 74% of the students would go to see for physical health assistance, and 15% would go for mental health assistance. I think it's interesting to note that in our school-based health center, the one in Brookings, the numbers are quite different. So we have 54% going for health, but we have 46% going for mental health. So that's 15 at the state, whereas ours locally is 46% visited for mental health reasons. That's a major concern to me. It talks about the past 12 months, how many days of school did you miss for any reason at all? And when you're looking at, I looked at, 6 to 10 days. At the state, 20% of the kids missed 6 to 10 days. In Brookings, it was 46%. So it's more than double the state average. When you're looking at how many kids missed 11 or more days, the state average is 18%. Brookings was 31%. So we're seeing some trends here. How many days have you missed for an emotional or health-related reason? For kids, the average on the state, for kids who missed 11 or more days, the state average was 6%. In Brookings, it was 31%. Rate your mental health. And your choices are, my mental health is excellent, it's very good, it's fair, and it's poor. The majority of them fell in the fair or poor category for rating their mental health. This is Brookings. I'm just looking at Brookings here. When you're looking at fair, 46% of the students said their mental health was fair, 23% said it was poor.
So do you have a copy of that study?
I do.
could get?
I do.
Okay.
And comparing that to the state, for example, only 9% of the kids in the state average said their mental health was poor. Ours was 23%. Past 12 months, any emotional or mental health care needs not met. So if you have some needs and they're not being met. In the state, 22% of the children surveyed said that their needs were not being met. In Brookings, it was 46%. Now, when you look at the center, so that's the students. Now, when you look at the center or those school-based health center, overall, very good responses from the students. They rate the center as being very good. They had some pretty good comments. Did staff spend enough time with you? The students, our students rated above average. They felt that they were getting the attention they needed. During the visit, did staff involve you in making decisions about your health care? Again, ours were above average, so the students are satisfied with the center itself. It's just that they have different issues elsewhere in the state. And then this one I thought was pretty sad was, is there at least one adult at the center that you feel really cares about you? And at the state average, it was, when you're looking at the state, 80% said, yes, I feel that somebody at that center cares about me. Our kids said 54%. So, and then you also look at, another aspect to that question is, again, does at least one adult at the center care about you? At the state level, 18% said, I don't know. Our kids said, 46% said, I don't know if anybody cares about me here. So it's pretty alarming, and it shows we have a lot of work to do. It does show the center's good. Kids like it. They like what they're getting there, but we have a long way to go to help these kids. And
Can I ask one quick question? I'm looking at the mental health thing, and do they have any professionals there that are trained in mental health in Brookings?
in our center, yes, I believe they do.
Okay.
But I will, for anyone who wants that survey, I can send it to you. Commissioner Gold, I'll send it to you for sure.
Yeah.
So, okay. And that's really all I had for the director's report.
Okay.
All right, Commissioner Gold?
Mine's very quick today. I'm just going to talk a little bit about SWAC. I've attended some of their SWAC and Beyond things. I went to a mushroom class that was really interesting. I wish I had been able to go to the field trip, but I was out of town. But they're moving along in that area, so I just thought I would report that. That's it.
Well, I'll make a comment about SWAC myself, and mine isn't quite as exhilarating as yours.
What do you got against mushrooms?
Some of the comments that I've heard their director, Bunn, say in public about the county, about the special districts meeting we've had, about asking questions about special districts and learning more about the way they're funded are very disheartening. To see him make some extremely rude comments about the county and who's running it and its direction as a educator in this county and as a director of a college are very, very disheartening to me. And I have written Patty this morning about my feelings on that. We have a lot of budget shortfalls in the county, and we're looking for ways to fund them. I'll say what I said again in the meeting the other day. We don't have Pilton SRS money anymore. We don't have timber revenues anymore. We don't even have places right now to hire professionals to come and live in this county because we don't have housing right now. We've been burned out of our house and homes in the county with the fires that we've had. Tourism has suffered. Our rivers are full of rock. Spawning grounds are in disrepair. Our hatcheries have found millions of dollars in damage to them. We've lost the ground cover for spawning salmon. The temperatures in the rivers are up. So how can we get tourism? How can we get growth in this county? All we're doing is asking questions about how to fund the county, making sure that your tax dollars are best spent, and for that we're being lambasted. I find that very discouraging, and I'm offended by it. But that's on a personal note. I would like to also say, on a very positive note, that the Rogue Jet Boats is being put into the Smithsonian Institute. They have a part there that is dedicated to rural counties, and the Rogue River being what it is as one of the world's greatest rivers. You know, the mailboat started here, what, a century ago?
Yes.
And there were some people that went out to fund that and to run that river every week and month, and one of them was a voice name that helped start that. And I was reading the articles this morning. Sherry McNair is preparing another box to send to the Smithsonian. That is the actual uniform that they wore in those days, the cap, the gloves, the scarf, everything that will be added to that display in the Smithsonian. I thought that was kind of really neat for Curry County to be in the Smithsonian Institute. So,
Very cool.
Boyce.
Thank you, Chair Pash. I thought your comments, I see both sides of the taxing district issue, certainly, but I want to commend you for the presentation, especially towards the end that you made. And you've already heard me say a couple of times publicly that I thought it took great courage to take on this issue, and I admire that. On the USDA disaster relief grants, we're moving, not as fast as I think we would like. The Parks Resource firm is working to get information from us, but they're also on vacation, and it's just part of the workload that we've not, we're following up, but we'll make the deadline. I'm reasonably confident. Do you have some new information on that, possibly?
Maybe.
Yeah,
In my
okay.
inbox.
We know we don't want to drop the ball here. Very, very important. And I'll be meeting with Deanna Quimby at Roseburg, who everybody feels bad for her with all the counties because she didn't have enough money to give everybody. But, you know, she's very determined, very dedicated. Another time. Commissioner Gold, I do want to acknowledge the volunteer boards that you've sat on in the past. I know you were also dedicated, so I didn't mean to imply. I hope that anything I ever say or display or demonstrate, the volunteers we have in this county are absolutely the best on the planet. That simple. And they are appreciated, and I'm working very hard to continually recruit as many as I can possibly find. I'm looking to, at some point here, bring before the board, if it has interest, and I believe it does, and that's I'm putting together a Curry Alternative Energy Alliance. And we had our offshore wind and alternative energy forum at SWAC Saturday, Pearl Harbor Day, and it went very well. And so I learned, Bill Bradbury spoke, Dennis Beetham from DB Western, Sam Schwartz, Shannon Souza, and the other was Bill Henry, a young guy that's got quite an education in energy. So the offshore thing is gaining interest. The biggest concern I have as a county commissioner is that I don't want the federal government to come in and essentially leapfrog over us and decide that we really don't have a say. And so I think that with the key people that were at this meeting and are willing to volunteer, I think that they will be in a position to really help coordinate and get an energy policy and make recommendations to the state and federal government. The state of Oregon is behind right now in alternative energy compared to California, compared to Wyoming, you name it. So I'm pretty excited about that. So I'm loosely calling it the Curry Alternative Energy Alliance, or maybe just the Curry Energy Alliance, but I'll bring that back to the board for approval. I am collecting some names and some interest, and again, I want to emphasize the quality of these people and their backgrounds and their willingness to help on this. And finally, just for today to finish, we talked a little bit about the AOCC lawsuits. Number one, on the Siskiyou National Monument. AOC has 55,000 acres in that monument that the previous president basically just says, yeah, we're going to include that, with no compensation to AOCC and the counties, and it will never be logged. And the ruling from the judge was, I'm sorry, but you couldn't do that, Mr. President. So that's been a really positive thing for our county. And of course, the main lawsuit has been 4 years, and that is the best way to characterize it or summarize it is that the timber in the 18 counties grows by 1.2 billion board feet every year. And the law that my grandfather was instrumental in putting together back in the late 30s, that eventually became law, was to mandate on a sustained annual yield for those 18 counties, 500 million board feet a year. And at 220, give or take, is the average million board feet a year. That is, it goes back to your point on PILT, SRS, forest burning down, timber receipts. So it's a good day for Curry County. It's a good day for AOCC. So we'll be hopefully presenting to the judge a plan, and that'll be discussed on our board meeting this coming Friday, day after tomorrow in Roseburg. And that plan is, we just want to get back to what the law requires. That's the way the judge saw it. That's going to be better receipts for our counties and all the services that we're trying to provide. So that's all I have for now. Thank you.
Okay, so at this time, we are going to enter into executive session per ORS 1926602A, E, F, and H. So we will come back in because we have some more business to take care of after executive session. I'm guessing probably 20 minutes for executive session, maybe 30.
Well, it depends if Josh comes up for executive session. Josh from Parks. Something.
Okay.
If he shows up, it might take a little longer.
I'll apologize to the board for not having my tie today. I left it on the counter this morning with my session from executive session, and board is to proceed as directed. We are going to move on now to number 11 on our agenda, hire orders. A, new hire, department specialist. 2, clerk's office. We already did that one, right? Need to approve the order?
We need to approve the order and backdate it. The staff's recommendation is it become effective December 16th, so we'd want to make sure the order reflects that.
All right, so this will be a recommendation for a hire order for the clerk's office, backdated to December, or forward dated to December 16th will be the effective date. Do I have a motion?
I so move.
Second, Mr. Chair.
Further discussion? Roll, please.
Commissioner Gold.
Aye.
Commissioner Pash.
Wow, aye.
Commissioner Boyce.
Yes.
Motion carried unanimously.
11B, Ms. Schmelzer?
So this was, we amended the agenda to discuss B. My recommendation is we postpone that until the next meeting. Move that that order over to our next meeting for further discussion.
I so move.
Do I have a second?
Second, Chair Pash.
Further discussion? Roll, please.
Commissioner Gold.
Aye.
Commissioner Posh.
Aye.
Commissioner Boyce.
Yes.
Motion carried unanimously.
Couldn't be consistent, could you?
Can she do a little more zing on her motion carried unanimously announcement? I'd like a little more. Can she JJ that up a little bit? I mean,
do we have anything further?
Well,
Well, would there be a motion to proceed as discussed in exec session? Oh,
He declared it, they didn't do a
thank
motion.
you. I
he just
apologize. Very, very good. That's fine. We have consensus. Thank you.
You're sensitive today.
declared. We have nothing under 12.
Why was I sensitive? I said I already did it.
I'm
That's all.
just,
Anything further?
No.
Meeting's adjourned.